Evening, ladies and gentlemen, members of council. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? I see none this evening. So we'll move on to the approval of council minutes. Looking for a mover and seconder to accept the minutes of the closed meeting held September 10th and September 24th. Councillor Verbicki, Councillor Jacobs. Discussion on that motion. All in favor? Motion carries. And then looking for the same for the council meeting held September 10th and 24th. Deputy Mayor and Councillor Dunn. Discussion on that motion. All in favor? And carried. Is there any business arising out of those minutes? If not, then we'll move right on to the Court of Revision. The Deputy Mayor is the chair of this court, and Councillor Dunn and myself are not members and will not be taking part.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening. We'll start with the Court of Revision, and I would need a motion to open that court. Councillor Jacobs, Councillor Verbicki, all in favor, and that's carried. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? I see none. And then we'll move on to the engineer's report, the Gosselin Drain Branch, and I'm assuming that's you, Mr. Botham. Thank you.
Thank you. The engineer's report for the Gosselin Drain Branch was considered by Council on September 7, 2018 and adopted. The purpose of this meeting of the court is to deal with any concern over assessment. We have not received any concern as of the start of this meeting today. There is a recommendation before you, and Gerard Rood is here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Botham. Questions? No one has a question? Then I'd entertain. Move the motion. Moved by Councillor Verbicki, seconded by Councillor Hammond. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you, gentlemen. And that is the closing then of the Court of Revision. Moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Hammond. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. So we'll move right on with reports of staff and delegation. The first one is Hogs for Hospice. They're not. Yep. You're good to handle it all by yourself, are you, Donnie? Okay. I trust you. I see Kira coming to back you up. Well, he could go. Yeah, we're going to have to listen to him tomorrow night, I think, anyway.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having us again at your town council meeting, and thanks for all your support over this past year and years. As we get ready to plan for our 2019 adventure, Kira had a few minutes to prepare a document with related to the economic impact. So as we've been growing the event, obviously more and more information is available to us as we move on, and we're really working hard to make sure that Leamington and the surrounding area also benefit, not just our proceeds that go to our hospital and hospital foundation. We would be announcing a amount of donation in the next week or so. We just have one of our guys away and on a long trip to Spain. So when he gets back next week, we'll be presenting that amount to the hospice, and I think everybody's going to be very impressed. So thanks again for all your support. Please keep the road construction on Forest to a minimum. Thanks.
We almost
It's election year, so you know you got to ask for the big favors, right?
we almost made it through.
Oh, look, my backup just showed up.
Yeah.
The muscle just came in as I said that. Did I forget to mention grant money too? Oh, yeah.
So I just wanted to sort of add to what Donnie had said. The economic impact report that we did for Hogs for Hospice, we used two different models. So one's out of the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport, and then there's another independent economic impact model. What it does is it calculates the number of visitors that are here, the number of visitors that are staying, our hotel occupancy rates, as well as the number of vendors that are from the community within Leamington and coming in from external. And we ranged the economic impact of the weekend of Hogs for Hospice between $2.1 and $2.5 million of an economic impact directly back into the Leamington community. So it's something that we are grateful and should be very proud of.
Absolutely.
We also had 276 on-site surveys completed at the event and 87 follow-up surveys, which gave us some really good qualitative data to go with the quantitative data of the event satisfaction. And I will be presenting some further data on that later on in the year, but I just thought that it was important. They talked about economic impact, but to really drill home those numbers that this group of individuals is bringing into our community.
Thank you.
Joe, did you want to jump in and say a few words too?
No, that's okay. You can. You don't want to know.
This is our third year. I know you guys have heard the story since day one. We believe that we've achieved everything that we have set out to achieve, and that's not to say that we're finished. We've said it time and time again. What started off as an event for healthcare has turned into an event for our community, and I think people are very quick to say, "Hey, was it a success?" And we all know that those questions or those comments are driven towards dollar figures, like this is the world that we live in. And I think that that is the most powerful dollar figure that you can state to this community is the economic impact. We talked from the very beginning that everyone wins. And I think we're creating something, and when I say we, I mean this entire community. We're creating a template of best practice. Best practice for throwing an event. We sit with our municipal officers, our police department, our EMS, our fire department, to make sure that everything that we're doing is in the best interest of this community, and that safety is always number one. When people ask us how was the event, the first thing out of all 7 of our mouths is 3 years running, not one police call, not one EMS call, not one fire call. That is a success when you're driving this type of event with tourism. The other success is every single social group in our community has come together for this event. And that speaks volumes, and that's best practice when you're looking across events across Ontario. One event that was not talked about that is becoming quite a topic of conversation is our Sunday morning worship. Our very first year, because of an unknown, we had to go to Ann Arbor, Michigan to find a pastor that would do our Sunday morning worship. And we were okay with that because there was the unknown. Since then, we've partnered with the Lake Point Church, and a service that went year 1 was 75 people, second year 800. This year, we're very proud to say that we have brought on 3 additional churches, and there was 1,200 people at that Sunday morning worship for a non-denominational service. And part of our vision and the Lake Point Church's vision is to one day, and it's coming very soon because now there's officially 5 churches on board. Our vision is for one day for every church to close its doors and for every member of this community, regardless of your faith, your religion, your religious background, to come together for one purpose about just being together. And that dream is slowly but surely being realized. We've tried to create an event that is unique across Ontario, and we believe that we have built such an event, and that is at no disrespect to any other motorcycle event across Ontario. But those events are traditionally one day, and ours is 3 days, and we've promoted this community, and we've done everything that we can to showcase this community, and everything that we do with the partnership of each and every one of you. We think that we've achieved that and that we've created an event where people will pack up and bring their families. Family-friendly event to Leamington, Ontario for 3 full days, because we're trying to build an event not only that people will see the value of spending their dollars, but an event that every resident in this community can be proud of. And I do mean every resident. And that was living proof when that registered ride led by our veterans, when the streets were full of citizens supporting those veterans. Trust me, they don't get that support everywhere that they go, and that speaks volume to the character of this community. So we are continuing on this journey. We are committed to this. Our board is staying intact, and it will not be possible without the ongoing support of our municipality. So we are here tonight counting on your support, regardless of the election results, because it's the right thing to do for this community.
Thank you very much. You're good? Okay.
One vision, one goal.
There you go. Councillor Jacobs.
I thank you, Worship. I just want to say, Dave, Joe, Donnie, and Tim, who's enjoying Spain, I guess. But anyway, I don't think there's enough words to express the appreciation that this municipality has to give to you individuals on your board and the efforts that you put into this. You guys put a lot of work into this, I think, behind the scenes that no one's really aware of. And it's not only your contribution to the hospice, but it's a contribution to the entire community, as Kira has made us. So, you know, I don't know how to say thank you. Thank you is really an understatement on my behalf. You know, I don't know what words would express my gratitude and appreciation for what you do for this municipality. You guys go above and beyond, if that ever was a phrase to use. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Councillor Hammond.
Your Worship, thank you. To all, your entire committee, I don't know if you anticipated this event growing to the magnitude that it is, to the success that it is. When you first started, I remember when you first came to council, and it's grown in such a large way that, and you touched on it, Joe, and Donnie as well, that the impact that it has on our entire community. You know, you think about motorcycles and the connotation that goes along with that, and you've dispelled that completely. Everybody understands now, if they didn't before, what it means now. And along with Councillor Jacob, and I can't speak for everyone in council, but there isn't enough words to say thank you to all your committee and the work that you put in, and we sure hope it keeps going, because it's been a tremendous thing for this community. Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else? Nope. Peter Neufeld. Mr. Neufeld.
I heard the comment about Forest. It's my understanding that the project is still on schedule, and that is scheduled to be completed yet this year. So that entire area should be ready to go before the end of the year. So there shouldn't be any problems for you next year.
Just from my perspective to all of you, and Joe, I remember the lunch, that very first lunch, and I think from the look on your face, you weren't necessarily expecting the positive support answer from us that you got. Just my interpretation, but it was I hate using the terminology, but it was a no-brainer. This was a group of business people in our town coming forward and saying, hey, can we do this on your property for you? And it was just an easy yes, absolutely, and how can we help? And I hope that the future council, whoever that may be, will have the same attitude. How can we help? Because this is huge. When you generate $2.1 to $2.5 million of spin-off business into our municipality, that's a huge economic benefit, and one that can't be ignored. And as has already been set up here, there's no other words greater than thank you, and that's from all of us on council. And congratulations, and we'll look forward to hearing your announcement in a couple of weeks. So, thank you, gentlemen. Yeah. So we've approached our planners in regard to the master plan and thinking it's going to be the longer discussion out of all of these. We want to get through all of the reports to council and then come back to the master plan. So with council's agreement, I'll just do that, and we'll see how quickly we can get through, or how long we can keep these guys sitting here. Yeah. So let's jump real quick to 11.3 then, the report regarding the Salvation Army Leamington Court boot drive for requests. And we do have a delegation, Lieutenant Brad Webster here. I'm sorry. And Brianna, I'm sorry, over here. She's going to start us off.
Thanks very much, Mayor Patterson. I won't go through the report in detail because you have done this before for many years, so I'll skip to the good stuff. So we have had a request from the Salvation Army Leamington Corps and members of the Leamington Firefighters Association who have volunteered their time to conduct a boot drive in Leamington on Saturday, November 3rd at the following intersections, which are noted above: Erie Street South and Pulford Avenue, Talbot Street East and Lush Avenue, and Talbot Street West and Elliott Street. So all money raised during the fundraising event will support the programs and activities of the Salvation Army in Leamington. They have a special event permit has been conditionally approved on the condition with the requirement for a resolution approved by council. And the recommended resolution speaks to issues of safety, nuisance, and liability. So regarding safety, approaching vehicles stopped in traffic, especially at Leamington's busiest intersections on a Saturday, is an inherently dangerous activity. Therefore, all volunteers approaching cars must be identified and wear hard hats or helmets, safety vests or bunker gear, and safety footwear. Volunteers must only approach cars that are stopped at red lights and not enter the traveled portion of the roadway until traffic has stopped. Regarding nuisance, many drivers do not want to be approached while in their cars. Most people do not want to feel pressured into making a donation, especially for a cause they may not support. Prior to the event, the Salvation Army Leamington Corps will advise the public of the boot drive and that all donations will help finance programs of the Salvation Army in Leamington. Volunteers approaching drivers must be polite, well identified, and not be persistent if no donation is forthcoming. Volunteers should offer all drivers approached with information about the Salvation Army so that the driver may display the information on the vehicle's dashboard to avoid further solicitation. And regarding liability, the Salvation Army must provide proof of insurance, which they actually have already, and indemnify the municipality against all claims that may arise as a result of the fundraising event. During the boot drive, the firefighters will not be covered by workplace safety insurance as the event is not occurring in the course of their employment. Regarding the financial impact, there will be no financial impact to the municipality as a result of this event. And I'll go back to the recommendation. So it is recommended that the application of the Salvation Army Leamington Corps to hold a boot drive on Saturday, November 3rd, 2018, between the hours of 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. at the intersections of Erie Street South and Pulford Avenue, Talbot Street East and Lush Avenue, and Talbot Street West and Elliott Street be approved pursuant to Section 3 of the Safe Streets Act 1999, subject to the following conditions: that all volunteers approaching cars are properly identified and wearing hard hats or helmets, safety vests or bunker gear, and safety footwear. Volunteers must only approach cars that are stopped at red lights and not enter the traveled portion of the roadway until traffic has stopped. Prior to the event, the Salvation Army Leamington Corps shall advise the public of the boot drive and that all donations will help finance the programs of the Salvation Army in Leamington. Volunteers approaching drivers must be polite, well identified, and not be persistent if no donation is forthcoming. Volunteers should offer all drivers approached with information on the Salvation Army. And the applicant agrees to indemnify and save harmless the municipality from all claims resulting from the event and provide a policy of liability insurance in the amount of $5 million, designating the municipality as an additional insured.
Thank you very much. Lieutenant, do you have anything to add to that, or are you just here in case we have some rapid-fire questions?
I'm just here in case you have rapid-fire questions.
Okay, good. Then I'll come up to council and say, all right, Councillor Hammond.
Your worship, I don't have a question, and I'd like to move the acceptance of the report with a seconder and then a comment.
Councillor Dunn seconds.
Great.
Comment?
You know, this event has gone on for a number of years, and it's a real, the residents of Leamington are very generous when it comes to this event. They appreciate the fact that the firefighters are out there collecting this money, and generally it raises in excess of $10,000, and it's well-needed money for the Salvation Army. So continue on with the good work, and thank you for your support in that.
Councillor Jacobs.
Thank you, Worship. The volunteers that are doing this, are they strictly firefighters, or are they other individuals that assist? Because I noticed in the past I've seen some real young people out there, and that sort of lifted a concern as to, are they, you know, in tune with traffic and so forth, or do they receive any direction?
I can only speak to the last 2.5 years that I've been here. I know previously there was that concern. The last 2.5 years, we have only had firefighters on the road collecting donations for that concern, especially for their safety.
Councillor Hammond.
Yes, to the council, thank you, Your Worship. To Councillor Jacobs' question, yes. Every one of the firefighters, before hitting the road, are gone through the safety regulations about what it takes I mean, the biggest mistake they make is when they say thank you, then they back up, and when they back up, they get back up into a line of traffic coming the other way. So prior to any of them going out on the road, they're all given the safety instructions and what to do and what not to do when they head out.
No more questions. Been moved and seconded. All in favor of the motion then, and motion carries. Thank you. Next report is one regarding Seacliff Facilities Booking Policy, and Kira.
Hello, it's me again. It's the recommendation for this is that council adopt the Seacliff facilities booking policy. So we used the programming in 2018 at the Seacliff Amphitheater really as a way to market the space to not only the general public, but to promoters, concert producers, those sorts outside of the community. And I think we did a pretty fantastic job. So I guess I should first say that this was a really phenomenal summer. We had exceptional attendance. I don't know if you remember when I came here a couple of months ago to talk about the concerts. We were projecting outside of the Sheepdogs concert between 250 to 500 attendees at every concert, and we were looking north of 2,000 for most of our concerts. So it was a phenomenal success. We heard amazing feedback, really positive feedback from the community and from outside. And again, I will come back later on in the year with some more information based on our surveys and data that we collected there. So getting into the brass tacks of it all, we used this year to work out some of the kinks or see if there were any kinks of the facility, figure out how we were going to manage that space going forward, and see what the recommendations were throughout the programming of the year. So we use this in combination with benchmarking from other communities who have amphitheaters similar to this, including Nathan Phillips Square in Toronto, to develop this policy. I did want to note that on page 2 of my report and page 3 of the booking policy, that there should be an addition under limitation that says that events with attendance over 2,000 people to be held at a Seacliff facility, excluding the amphitheater. So I did want to make that note. So I'm going to go through the highlights of this, and then feel free to ask me any questions that you have. We realized as we were going through the process, there are many bookable areas of Seacliff Park, and this is also based on people who have approached me throughout the year with potential festival ideas, which I'm happy to say that there have been a number of potential festival ideas that have been floated around, as well as how we currently use this space, including for events such as Hogs for Hospice. So we've identified the bookable spaces as the amphitheater, the beach area, the park itself, the picnic pavilion, and the volleyball courts. And you can see those identified in the map that was with Schedule A. So the eligibility of events provides that special events that are held at the amphitheater must be for entertainment purposes only. So that would be musical, theatrical, or cinematic performances. And the priority of bookings works that priority 1 is that special events that are organized by the municipality of Leamington get the first opportunity to book space, followed by annual events that are held at the park, which are operating within a standard acceptable by the municipality, so Hogs for Hospice would be a good example of that. Priority 3 is all other special events, and then in the booking policy, we delineate a little bit more what that means if we get bookings that we determine have equal event or equal economic impact on the same date. So if we want to move into, the fees for this will also be given to you later in the evening. So we can discuss that now, or we can discuss that later, but they will be presented and discussed and can be spoken to by both Laura and Rob later this evening. We've also given an input process. So this allows us to take input for the amphitheater booking between October, so the first day of October. Obviously, that will be delayed a little bit this year until the last business day of December. Then we have a 2-week process internally, which allows us to go through the bookings and determine who would be the successful people to book that space. That also gives us a little bit of time annually to determine what our programming might look like in an upcoming year. If we have people that want to come in and external groups that book the amphitheater every weekend, then we might not have as much of a need to put on a higher level of programming at that space, and we can direct those resources elsewhere. So, moving on to the policy. Some things of note are that special events that are held at Seacliff Beach and Seacliff Park must be open and available for the use of the public. That is to make sure that the park it's a publicly funded park, that people are still able to come and enjoy events that are held at the park. Events that are held at the amphitheater and at the volleyball courts, so volleyball tournaments, for example, will be allowed to be ticketed and will be allowed to be 19-plus events. So we did put a limitation here for the Seacliff Park and beach space, well, everything except for the amphitheater, in that events with attendance of over 2,000 people, so major large-scale festivals, are limited to 5 in a calendar year between June and October, or one per calendar month. And that is because, again, the purpose of the park is as a passive space to the community. And although the council has the ability to, through their direction and through the strategic priorities as delivered by you, for example, the festivals and events pillar of the tourism strategy, you have the ability to make decisions outside of that. This is our hope, that the park will still remain passive and well utilized as it is by members of the community. And I've already gone over the priority booking and the time of booking and the confirmation of booking. So I think that sums up the high-level portions of that.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Jacobs?
Thank you, Worship. First, I wish I brought my sunglasses, a reflection off the rock on your finger. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Beach weddings. I know that some people have inquired, and I've taken a couple of comments regarding getting married on the beach. Are they able to do that? Is that part that they could utilize that beach for? Like, could they reserve a spot? And like, you only, I guess, would be a couple hours for a beach wedding, whatever it takes, but.
As our policy currently exists, no, that is not possible. There is availability to book beach weddings at Point Pelee National Park, though, so there is a beach space available within the community that they do book for.
We're not looking at doing anything at Seacliff, then, in other words.
Not this moment, currently.
The other thing, going through the report on this, and just a couple of questions. Like, if a large group is running the amphitheater, and do you have like a rain date? If they rent it for, I guess, this particular day or evening or whatever, is that transferable to the next night if they're stormed out or whatever? Or do you have arrangements for that?
As it currently stands, and with the benchmarking that's been in place, is that unless previous arrangements have been made and a fee has been paid to reserve that spot for them, then that is not a possibility. That it is known that it's an outdoor event and that these sorts of things happen. But I do want to say that we do communicate with our event hosts that host outdoor events, that there is, for extreme weather circumstances, there is insurance that can be purchased for cancellation of events that have an economic impact to those groups. So we would certainly communicate that with them.
Okay, Councillor Wilkinson?
Thank you, Mayor. And Kira, just a few questions. Since we're new to this business, you know, we're learning as we go here, and I think we're doing a fantastic job, and all thanks to you too. You're doing a great job with this portfolio. Concentrating on the amphitheater part, though, I just want to make sure that we aren't maybe shooting ourselves in the foot when it comes time to rent this facility out. Have we checked with people in the industry, the professional concert goers you're talking about, promoters, all of them, to make sure that our fees are in line and not too one way or another? Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, certainly. So we did do benchmarking in other communities and checked with various concert, everything that you just said, and checked with various concert promoters. And then internally, additionally, we made sure that we were, that there was an element of staff recovery as well, because there is a certain amount of resources from our municipality as far as public works goes for major events like that. So our fees are well in line and with comparable spaces.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. I was going to ask you the same thing that Councillor Wilkinson did, but this comes up so many times. How easy is this going to be for the public to book? Will they book through you? Will it be on our website? How? We need to make this so that it isn't complicated because you're dealing with several venues, right? The amphitheater, the beach area, the park, and so on. What is the process going to be for that?
It'll all be booked through ActiveNet, and then the special events process will be what we currently do. So I can speak with great confidence in saying that Brianna, who's currently managing that, does an excellent job walking the special events people through the process and helping them with things that we have questioned. And then we have an internal process that pushes it out to all the different departments. So we've really taken a proactive approach. And again, thanks to Brenda and the clerk's department last year with the special events process, this has made it the communication of special events and to the special event organizers, I would say, quite seamless.
Further, just one more question. This might be not the exact spot to ask you, but we've tried this now for the first year without charging attendance to our own events. Are you looking at continuing that in the next while and perhaps moving towards a cost recovery on this, or what is? And I hope that's not. It just seems to be a time to ask that question, whether or not it's appropriate. I'm not sure.
So, Mr. Neufeld?
The plan all along was to have these free concerts, in large part so that our community can come down and enjoy this new area. But it was also a bit of a loss leader to encourage people from outside the area to come to see the concert, because when you come to see the concert, you also see our beach. You see our beach volleyball courts, you see our pedestrian pier, you see the waterfront as a whole. This is in keeping with our tourism strategy to become a destination in our waterfront area. So bearing that in mind, what we were hoping would happen is beginning to happen, where there are going to be external promoters who want to come and rent the space. That's why we had to put this policy together. So the municipality intends on still hosting a couple of concerts free for the community, but rather than having 6 or 8 concerts as we did this year, those concerts may very well fall into the hands of private promoters. Those events then would be gated and ticketed and will begin to offset some of our liability while the waterfront area and the amphitheater continues to be used. So even within our budgeting process that we've begun, we're looking at, well, how much are we budgeting? How many concerts are we hoping to host this year as the municipality, as we are also speaking with private groups, as well as some even local groups that are interested. And not to mention, we still have to go back and talk again with the Bank Theatre, because that forum brought a lot of local talent in as well, and I think that was very much appreciated as we work with our partners. So the answer is the budgeting itself is likely to be smaller because we won't be hosting as many concerts ourselves, but there will be we anticipate private promoters coming in and utilizing the facility as we had hoped it would draw.
So my question was going to be along the same lines as the third-party promoters, as I was calling them, but external promoters sounds even better. Is the income that would be generated to the municipality simply the fee that we will be charging? So there's no sharing of gate tickets or anything like that. So just cost recovery, and that's I'm okay with that. I just wanted to be clear.
Yes. So it is a cost recovery model.
Recovery. Okay, very good. All right, and the whispers I'm hearing sound pretty exciting for 2019, so I hope it happens. Anyway.
Yes. Thank you, everybody, for your continued support throughout the year. It was a really phenomenal year to not only be a resident, but an employee of the municipality. So thank you for your vision and your support, and to all of the administration and council and staff and everybody in the community who made this so special. So thank you.
So we have a recommendation before us. Order Council moved by Councillor Jacob, support by Councillor Hammond. Discussion on the motion. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is report regarding the Leamington Water Distribution System. Shannon?
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. The purpose of this report tonight is to provide you with the 2018 Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks drinking water inspection reports for both the Union System and the Wheatley Distribution System. So the Ministry of the Environment recently changed its name to the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, and they do annual inspections on the drinking water systems to determine compliance with the Safe Drinking Water Act regulations and environmental compliance approvals. Luckily, this year, both of our systems were inspected on the same day, back in June. And this report, the purpose of it is to provide the owner with the inspection reports and receive a resolution for confirmation of receipt. In addition, we post these reports on our website so that the public can view them, and that this report satisfies the advertising of that availability. During the inspections this year, the ministry did not note any items of noncompliance, nor did they provide any recommendations for either system. So in summary, the inspection summary rating record indicated a risk rating of 0% and a final inspection compliance rating of 100% for both systems. So in closing, the recommendation before council is that the Ontario Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks drinking water system inspection report for the Leamington Union Distribution System be received. The Ontario Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks drinking water system inspection report for the Leamington Wheatley Distribution System be received, and that the reports be placed on the municipality's website and also be made available for public inspection. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions from council? Deputy Mayor moves, support by Councillor Dunn. Just one comment from me is the minister of the MECP forgot the C when he was introducing himself in Kingsville the other day to all of us. So he just called himself the Minister of Environment and Parks. So still learning. Anyway, great reports. Thank you very much. No further questions. All in favor of the motion? And carried. Thank you. Next report up is one regarding the Lloyd Wilkinson Park renewal. Mr. Brown, and we've spent some time on this one.
Yes. Good news.
Yes. It is good news.
Yeah, thank you, and good evening, Mayor and members of council. So in the 2018 Parks budget, $150,000 was approved towards the renewal of Lloyd Wilkinson Park. Bazaar Partners prepared a concept plan which illustrated the intended improvements as well as preliminary cost estimates. The proposed improvements included new play equipment, additional lighting and benches, and improved drainage and repairs to the existing walkways. Residents in the vicinity of the park were notified of the project and offered the opportunity to review and comment on the plans. Overall, the feedback was very positive. The main request was to include a swing set and additional benches. So we did put in some swing sets in there, and if we do have some funds left over at the end, we'll put in some additional benches. We do have benches in there, but we'll put a few more in if we can fit it into the budget. Request for proposal was issued with a specified maximum budget of $53,000 plus taxes for the supply and installation of the play equipment. So we received 4 proposals. One from ABC Recreation, one from Play Power, and then 2 from Henderson Recreation. So the administration reviewed and scored each proposal. And basically we were looking for their budgets, their overall budget, if they came in under budget. How much of the money went into the equipment versus installation. Delivery time. Which proposal offered the most variety of equipment for different age groups that filled an irregular space that we have out at that park. And the overall layout, and that they have to meet the minimum specifications. So at the conclusion of this review, administration chose Henderson Recreation's second option as their preferred proposal. Their supply and installation quote was $52,897 plus taxes. So the total cost to renovate the park is proposed, as proposed, is a little over $144,000, including net HST. Barring any unforeseen delays, it is expected that the works will be complete this year in 2018. So the recommendation is the purchase of the play structure for Lloyd Wilkinson Park in the amount of $52,897 plus HST from Henderson Recreation Equipment be approved, and that the manager of Public Works be authorized to execute the purchase agreements. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Verbicki, sorry.
Thank you. I know where you can spend the extra money you've saved. And I'm not knocking any sports or anything, but the main question asked to the Queen Elizabeth students when I'm sure we all attended was, when are you going to fix Lloyd Park? Hopefully this year. What do you want? We want soccer nets. And it's not in here. You know, if you're going to fix a backstop, fine. Kind of tweak it, but I know Chestnut there, the pizza park, I'm going to call it. You know, we were worried about putting fencing up and, you know, the neighbors and the keys and the drive-through. They've got 2 beautiful soccer nets there too. You know, they don't have to be regulation size for the pitches, but I think they should be included somewhere in there because the kids surveyed want it instead of using boots.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Ken, can you give me an example? Where do we have engineered wood mulch base on one of our parks right now?
Through you, Mayor, we have it at the Pizza Park, the Chestnut Park there, Rickway Park, at the soccer complex. There's the wood mulch. Pretty sure at
Fantastic,
that
and
park.
it works the best
It works
of all the
well.
materials you tried?
Ideally the best surface is like what we have at the Seacliff Park.
Right.
It's very expensive, and when we have to repair it, it's difficult to repair. So this wood fiber mulch, it's engineered like it's especially engineered and treated and prepared, processed for playground. So there's no slivers or anything like that. So it's a good product. You know, everything has its pros and cons, but it's a good product. It's affordable, you know, and it serves a purpose.
Sure, thank you. And I echo Councillor Verbicki's comments. Grade 7 class worked us over pretty good about a soccer field. Definitely, that is noted and a big suggestion from them. And I went and had a look at it. I didn't realize how big this park was. And it wasn't until I started looking around. I think the best addition to this whole plan is the lighting. I love the fact that we're going to light this place up for safety's sake. But please, yes, I think it's not a huge deal to maybe consider a soccer field, not too expensive of a trip, but some consideration should be given to that in the future here. Thank you.
Councillor Hammond.
Your Worship, thank you. Ken, just a thought as I was traveling around as well. When we move forward, not on this project, but when we move forward, when we're looking at renovating other parks, there's a lot of playground equipment sitting in front of the old Mill Street School that isn't being used. And I don't know if it would be appropriate, if it's equipment that can be used, to put a call into them to find out if in fact they'd be willing to part with that equipment. There's a bunch of it sitting out there.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I went and had a look at it as well, Ken. I have some concerns with that big hill in the middle of the park. I see it as a place for kids to hide behind, or adults probably more so than kids. I like the idea that it's being lit, but I think it would be way better served if that hill wasn't there, simply because it is such a deep park. And I don't know, maybe they sled and toboggan on it, but to me it creates a lot of kind of hideaway spots that I don't think are conducive to good behavior or conducive to bad, whatever it is. But it's something at some point in time I think we should have a real good look at. And I know people that live in that area that have had concerns with that. It just allows people to get behind that. You can't see them from the road, and everyone's backyards tend to be fenced in lots without gates. So it's not like you could even get access to that real quick if you saw somebody getting a beating or anything like that. But to me, when it's that deep, we're setting ourselves up for behavior we may not like to see happen. So I just think it's something to consider and maybe keep an eye on and even question some of the abutting property owners, because I think it's really, it's just a sightline blockage to the back of the park.
Mr. Brown?
Through you, Mayor. I would agree with that. Like, it does create a blind spot, and there are, if you look at the map there from the road, that park is kind of unique the way it's laid out. There are several kind of blind spots. So yeah, we'll review it. I don't know if it would be appropriate to do like a community survey or something like that. I don't know. You know, if we remove the hill, sometimes you might get a lot of negative feedback from people who maybe do toboggan off of it. But we'll definitely consider it, as well as the soccer nets as well. We'll talk about it internally.
Councillor Dunn.
Through you, Your Worship. Ken, my question in regards to your report, it talks about budget pressures after you already have a set price. What kind of budget pressures are you anticipating?
I don't know exactly where the budget pressures were. Basically, the way we came up with the budget was we had Bazaar partners. We kind of walked around the park and put together a scope and what it was going to cost to do all this, and then that kind of gave us some guidance as to how much money each line item is going to cost per se. So I think everything kind of falls in place pretty good, and I think it should come out overall pretty good. I think the only thing would be, like I say, the benches, but I've already communicated, we have programs for that, like memorial benches. Some residents were already asking if they could perhaps use that program we have to install more benches, which we said, yes, absolutely you can. So there's other ways to add future amenities to the park and stuff. The big things we wanted to get done was improve the drainage, the sidewalks, put in new play equipment, because that stuff's starting to get very, very old. So I think budget-wise, I think we should be okay.
Mr. Sharon?
Thank you, Your Worship. Certainly, if there's more council questions, we'll be happy to entertain that. But given the fact that we do, after this particular meeting, we plan to start working, get the ball rolling on all of the line items that council sees. I think what we can commit to is we will add 2 soccer nets, likely not regulation, but something very similar to Chestnut Park, and we'll get those installed at the park. That will include that as part of the scope. The hill, perhaps we'll leave that for now. And we'll keep an eye on it, and certainly if we start to experience issues or additional concerns, then we'll come back to council and talk about, perhaps some additional amendments if that's council's wishes.
Okay. Councillor Verbicki.
Where the mayor, it says right in here, thanks, it says you have drainage issues. You got free dirt right there too, so just don't bring in dirt when you need it. So, Mr. Brown, if I can, I'm glad to hear that council has been out and taking a look at this park, because this has been on your desk and my desk for some time. So happy to see this happening. I'm happy to hear that it's going to start right away. And I trust you will call our mutual acquaintances and let them know the good news. And I'm sure they'll be happy too. So. Oh, good. All right, so we do have a recommendation. Moved by Councillor Verbicki, support by Councillor Wilkinson. Discussion on the motion. All in favor? And carried. Next item up is a report regarding the Marina seasonal lease agreement. Mr. Barnable?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a report on the new Marina seasonal lease agreement. It just provides more clarification in writing on things that we're already doing in practice. There's no real significant changes. I don't know if council wants me to go through A through N, as they're just language items in a contract. The only significant change that I just highlight for you would be E, the change in termination of the agreement date from the first day of May to the first day of June. So there'll be an extra month there for boaters to choose their slips. So that's the only thing that I could see as a tangible change. Everything else we're doing in practice, and we're just laying it out in writing.
Very good. Okay. Questions for council? Councillor Jacobs?
Thank you, Worship. The one area that I received some request on is the fact that there's a charge to store your dinghy beside your boat. this is a little rubber craft. They want $150 to do that. I know it was in last year's, but I guess it's quite a complaint. The individual's already rented their well. They're using that space. The dinghies are normally secured to the boat, which is part of the well. And they think that's a big cash grab, and personally I think it is too, for the idea that it's not really taking any space and the boat's already there. So, any comments or?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can see I can see what you're saying, and I can see the difficulty in what we define as a dinghy or another boat or something that's used. But it is part of the fee schedule right now. It is something I guess we could look at if council wished to. But it's my understanding, and Terry had brought that up as well as being an issue. But in practice, it was always considered to be a second vessel or boat.
Well, if I may, Your Worship, when I refer to a dinghy, it's like your little rubber boat.
Yep.
You know, and to me, it is being a little bit excessive, and as the individual's already saying, they've already rented that particular area. You know, I guess it's like renting a room. If you bring in an extra suitcase, you got to pay more money type thing. But anyway, if there's a way that could be looked at, or maybe even deleted for this year. I mean, I know there's not that many, but still, it's a sore point.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, maybe we can look at something based on size or something along that nature. But yeah.
Okay. Councillor Wilkinson?
I rely on my fellow boater friend here beside me to come up with those good suggestions, and yeah, I think that one makes perfect sense. I haven't heard it, but I think I can see the people that make complaints like that, the reason why, and I think that's a valid concern for us to consider and maybe pull from there. So please do. Give that consideration and may report back to us on that. Through you, Mr. Mayor, the only thing I can't say, Ronan is not here, or Terry, is operationally if that causes any type of issues for us, but I wouldn't know how to respond.
Councillor Dunn?
Through you, Your Worship. Paul, this part here says that if the slip is vacant for excess of 24 hours, that the corporation may permit it for a transient boater. I think that might cause some problems if you don't know how long the boat's gone or when they're going to come back. So what are you going to do in the meantime? The transient's in there, and then the people that have already paid for that slip want to come back and use their slip.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, my understanding is that when they leave, they notify us about when they're going to return. That I think a portion of what we receive from the transient boater does go to the person who has rented the slip. So I guess it's to the benefit. If they don't notify us, I don't think that we would rent out that slip or that dockage. But it would be to the advantage of somebody that we're leaving for a period of time to let us know as they do get revenue from that.
And further, there's about the no subleasing as well. So they have friends that they're going to be gone for the weekend and they want to let somebody else use their slip. And we're not allowing that, and they're paying for that spot.
Well, that would be covered, through you, Mr. Mayor, that would be covered through the transient boater. As I said, they would get revenue from that by allowing somebody else to use their slip. But no, they couldn't loan it to somebody. And that's my understanding. That's been a practice for quite some time, and it's probably been a matter of debate for council in the past.
Okay. So we do have a recommendation. I mean, it's lengthy recommendation, but really only one that had a significant date change in it. That's about it. So moved by Councillor Jacobs, support by Councillor Hammond. Discussion on the motion. All in favor? And motion carries. Next report up is one regarding the 2019 fee schedule. Ms. Roach?
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. Annually, administration reviews the municipal fees that are presented to council for consideration. These fees are established to apply a user pay or fee-for-service approach to services that benefit a particular group or individual. These fees supplement taxation revenues and therefore reduce the taxation burden for funding municipal services that one group benefits or has the opportunity to enjoy. Administration has considered market rate comparisons, service delivery standards, and cost increases to propose the rates for 2019. The rates presented in the draft schedules may be subject to HST and would be applicable as of January 1st, with the exception of the complex, where we apply the rates effective July 1st. The 2019 fee schedule is being presented to facilitate budget preparations, as Peter has mentioned, are well underway. So should circumstances change throughout the year or during budget implications, further reports recommending in-year fee adjustments similar that we've brought before council would be brought to this council for consideration at a later date. So once again this year, administration has reviewed current practices to ensure that all fees are charged as represented in the report. Fees established in this bylaw are charged accordingly and are not waived unless directed by council. The report provides Schedules A through N departmentalizing the fees for council's consideration. 2018 fees as approved are also presented for comparison. On page 2 of the report, the changes are highlighted. So to quickly summarize, the changes for the Kingsman Complex and Arena fees, that work has been done on this fee schedule to remove the duplication and to help assist with administering these fees. So this includes combining the capital surcharge with the hourly rental charge, as this will improve the booking process for the users and will also simplify the understanding of the invoice. The impact to revenues will be nil with this change. The original intent of the capital surcharge was to establish a reserve fund for life cycle replacement. Administration's intent is that it included in the 2019 budget continues to be a contribution for the life cycle replacement at similar dollar levels. The increase Other increases in this area relate to the part-time salaried policy that was approved by council in the latter part of 2017, which has also required an adjustment to some of the programming fees and training costs to make sure that costs are fully recovered. Fees at the complex for businesses to sponsor open swim or public skating have also been added. At the marina, there are two minor changes that are being recommended, and those are for the barbecue rental to cover operational costs for propane, as well as the pump out fee changing from $11.50 to $15. In the fire services area, it's recommended that there are increases to the fire extinguisher training to cover the additional costs. And additionally, Chief Baird has recommended charging back the MTO for recoveries on provincial highways. This is an acceptable practice, and the rates are determined by the province. To ensure full transparency, we've included this fee for 2019 as well. Within parks and seasonal fees, the capital surcharge similar to the rec are also being recommended to be included with the hourly rates. In addition, these rates were previously 4-hour blocks, so this is also a change for 2019, and why there are significant changes when you look at the year-to-year comparison. Like I said, previously groups were required to block 4 hours. Now they will be only reserving time that they're actually on the fields or on the soccer pitches. So based on current practice, we've also added memorial park benches and trees with plaques to the fee schedule at full cost recovery. And as Kira mentioned in her report, a cross-functional team reviewed the amphitheater booking rates and have recommended the rates for weekday and weekend bookings as presented in the schedule. For both PCC and water, we've recommended rate increases based on their approved rate studies. To keep the property information requests consistent with drainage, property information requests and apportionments on Schedule K recommends increasing some of those drainage fees to be more consistent across the corporation. On Schedule L, the Legislative Services is recommending a new fee for the review of the applications for liquor license. And finally, on Schedule N, we are proposing two new fees for requests to dispose of municipally owned lands, as well as subsequent follow-up requests for property information reports. So as previously mentioned, all fees included in this report have been reviewed and recommended by the managers and directors of the responsible areas. As a result, we will all participate in providing further detail if council should have specific questions. So the recommendation before council this evening is that the proposed 2019 fee schedule be approved, and that administration be directed to forward bylaw 60-18 to provide for tariff of fees to be charged in 2019 by the municipality of Leamington. Thank you.
Councillor Verbicki.
Thank you, worthy mayor. I don't know if you can answer, but I have a couple. I guess the first one is probably, we're getting older, and I'm possibly moving. I want to go to I still call it the shirk. Why did you remove the 3-month New Year shape-up fee? Is it such a burden? And I need it. Yeah, thanks, John. You don't get a body like this by
No.
sitting here.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we actually, what we've removed is a New Year's shape-up fee and a spring shape-up fee. But all we've done there is we still provide a 3-month discount or discounted fee. So it's just removing the New Year's and spring parts. So now anytime you can come for a 3-month
Tune-up? Yeah, okay.
tune-up.
I'm going to need
if you
some,
want, yeah.
some free
It's,
passes or something here.
Yeah, it's just really just removing those the seasonal part of it.
Okay, and I was going to ask here, and then I was even going to ask Thenworthy Mayor if I can continue. I've got one more.
Yep.
And it was brought up again, and it's and I was going to have it in my open session later, but I'm going to do it right now because it's the hot topic now. Is I guess the memorial park benches. I've been approached by the Lions Club, and I'm sure it's been brought around here to put a memorial park bench in the Rick Atkins Park for a former councillor of the town, Don Nicholson. They're willing to pay it all, but I don't know if they said they contacted anybody here. They said they did, but I'm going to consider the source. But I just want to make sure that it's there, and they're having their meeting later on, and they want to know a cost because they would like. I'm going to try to hold off now if council approves this. That they're going to do it, that maybe first bench in the new year because of the weather and stuff too. But would there be, there's, I know it's cost recovered, but just a guesstimation, Rob?
It did make it through my office. I mean, that came through originally through my office and then through you again, and that was immediately forwarded to Mr. Barnwell's. And so, yeah.
So they've got it, but they wrote the same thing. Well, nobody's called me back.
Well,
no, it's that. It's just.
We'll find out,
fine.
Mr. Barnwell.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I did initially receive that, but my understanding is that those types of programs are run through Public Works. So I did see email. I put them on to Mr. Brown. I did see email exchanges back and forth with between Mr. Brown and.
That's fair.
And
so you're aware of it, and
Yep.
I think Rob wrote something down. So hopefully.
It was $800 to $1,200 depending on the
Okay.
bench.
Thank you very much. And my last question, it deals with Seacliff Park, and when Kara was there, I was going to ask her, is there a reason why we are lowering the fees for the picnic shelter? I mean, it's a hot commodity, and people always want it. So I see it's on page 97, or page, whatever, right here, 16 in your report. You went from $100 per hour down to 15, and it's based just on an hourly rate. So I know if you're using that for a cost recovery, we are paying more than $15 in wages to clean up or whatever we're doing there. It's about halfway down on page 97 of 120. I just that caught my eye because it says change to an hourly rate. How much are we renting it out for? Are we renting it out for citizens for $100, and now we're taking it down to $15 because I don't know. Is there a reason why? Because I think, if anything, we should keep it at that. I don't want to increase it because it's a family park, but I can't see why we have to lowball it.
Mr. Sharon?
Thank you, Your Worship. We said change to an hourly rate. I wish we would have wrote changed from a daily rate to an hourly rate because then it would have been more clear. So it was previously, if you wanted to rent it, you rented it for the entire day. What we found was, for one, it booked up very quickly, and two, most people who were renting it, some do want it for the entire day, but most people who were renting it only wanted it for a couple hours, such that if families wanted to have birthday parties down there now this summer, we could likely tell people, well, it's not available in the morning, but it's available in the early afternoon, and they can rent it in 2-hour blocks, 3-hour blocks, whatever fits their intentions.
And one more follow-up. I mean, who's in charge of this? Because I was approached by somebody who did rent it, and it got into a close nose, no fists were thrown battle because they said they had it, and they said the other one had it. It was for a 50th wedding anniversary. And I know the person wouldn't be lying to me saying he booked it. But somebody also said they had it too. Is there any way of getting a whiteboard there or something permanent just to say, okay, the Rouch party or something like that, just that they've already booked it to just to clear up because people just think they can come in and use it. I know. Just that's all I have to say.
Mr. Sharon?
The challenge is that we don't leave staff there guarding the facility through the day. So oftentimes, we will have to have our staff go and tell people, hey, you can't move the picnic tables out of the shelter because it is rented for the event. The public just comes, parties, families just come and start using it, and we do have to, escort them out. Especially this year, now that we expect, multiple different bookings per day. And we're going to have to pay some attention to it. It all goes through Public Works. We might have situations where obviously one of the two parties was mistaken, but certainly that could be resolved by looking at their documentation that they received when they paid for the booking, or talking to somebody that was working there on staff, or calling the Public Works supervisors on call. So I don't anticipate that that should be a problem going forward.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Paul, this would probably be the best one for you. I think I've asked this, I know I asked this in years past, but our arena hockey boards, the first 5 there have been sitting at the same mark since 2005. Why aren't those being increased to keep up with the rest of the increase that's happening?
Yeah, I think it just mostly has to do with the market. We have what we have. You're talking about the rink boards.
Yes.
Yeah.
Since 2005, so 13 years later, we're still sitting at the 2005 rates. I'm thinking that there's room for an increase at that spot. I'm surprised it hasn't, and I've asked it in years past. I'm familiar with it since I used to do a lot of the signs over there when it first opened. I don't know why this every year it doesn't move. I expect it to, but it hasn't. Where the rest of them have, but this one hasn't. And just wondering if there's a reason why there hasn't. I wonder if you can explain it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the recommendation didn't come from Terry and them to do it. My assumption when we did discuss it was that, we're having some difficulty in selling them all, and had more to do with the market than anything else. Increasing the price and reducing the number was what we would be faced with. So I think it's more of a market thing than anything else. Yeah.
Councillor Hammond.
Your Worship, thank you. I want to talk a bit about the marina fees, if I may, and I thought Terry might have been here. Yes.
Sorry, just one more point for Councillor Wilkinson that I didn't think of. Also, that they're sometimes in 3-year contracts, 2 and 3-year contracts, so they wouldn't change from year to year in the fee schedule.
Okay. Yep. So, Paul, I'll address the question to you. I was pleased to see on page 83 that we're going to get the picnic shelter rent-free to boaters, full-time boaters who are down there, which is seasonal boaters, which is good. But I want to talk a bit about, and I asked this the last year when we were here. I want to take you to page 90 of the report, and it talks about the payment for hydro. I asked last year, and I'm going to ask again, that I'd like to see the hydro find a way of giving us a better idea of how much hydro is being used by both the boats and or by the picnic shelter and the washrooms and the office space, if we can divide the two to give us a better feel for what's being used. And I know, in looking at this again, there's a fee for some boats from 19 to 24 feet, and some boats don't even have a shore power cord when they're that small. And I think some of the larger boats may be getting away a little cheaper. So I think with hydro rates going up as they are in today's times, I think we need to get an idea of what we're actually using ourselves and what the boaters are actually using.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yep. I hear you, Councillor. I guess it wouldn't be economical to place meters at every slip. That would be a cost that we couldn't bear. It's being done based on size. I wouldn't assume that a larger boat uses more hydro than a smaller boat, because it depends on the equipment that they have. An older boat may have older equipment, and so on and so forth. So to really measure, you'd have to have some sort of meter. Now, we could look at working with somebody, hydro or somebody, to probably give us a better idea, look at some samples maybe of what they consume and base our rates on that. But I couldn't see it being economical to to have a meter at every dock or every slip, to have that installed.
You know, and I appreciate that, and that wasn't my intent to put a meter at every dock. But to your point, that bigger boats don't use much more hydro than smaller boats. There are some boats down there that have two 50-amp cords running to them. And you don't have to be, you know, when I look at the price and how it's broke down here, I just think that we need to find out what the boating community in its entirety are using, and I think that can be done internally by putting meters, so we know what we're using with respect to the shelter and the washrooms, and I'll go back to that again. It's also my understanding that there is a way of spot checking the usage of individual boats, you know, and do a random check, and that'll give us a better feedback for where we really stand. I mean, we may be right on the money, but I think we need to know.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. I just want to say that the business license fees are in this as well. And should the next council decide to change any of those or make additions or change the renewal fees, that will be possible still to do. Okay, I just wanted that out there, that we recognize that those fees are already in there, but it still means that we can adjust should we see a requirement to do that at some point in time. Thank you.
Ms. Roach?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Deputy Mayor, that's absolutely what we've done actually this year several times. We've brought amendments before council, and we've just amended that bylaw to do the exact same thing.
No further questions. Councillor Dunn?
Through your worship. For the Kinsman Recreational Center, I know you talk about surcharges, and they're added in here, and it changes the actual prices. But we actually have one here with the area of floor rental per day, and it changes from $489 to, it was $2,000 last year, and it's now $489. What kind of surcharge are we talking?
I think that's more, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, I think that's more a change in practice. What we do for the gymnasium, we have an hourly rate, but then after five hours, I think it is that that turns into the per day rate. So you would be, after 5 hours, you wouldn't be charged any different. And I think that's more of a change in how we bill versus what the hourly rate is.
Yeah, the surcharge, though, you talk about it in different areas throughout this on the Kinsman. Now, is that a standard rate, the surcharge, for? Like, do you have a price in head?
Yeah, I think the surcharge is $6 for everything. I think Laura can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's $6 for everything. So that's been rolled into the fee versus being separated out. Yep. But it's unrelated to the item that I mentioned there earlier, where we cap the daily rate. So after 5 hours, you're basically just paying that rate.
Okay. Further questions? Not, there's a recommendation here. What are council's wishes? Moved by Councillor Jacobs, supported by Councillor Dunn. All in favor? And carried. Next item on the agenda is a report regarding the tender results for road resurfacing and gravel road elimination program. Mr. Botham?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Annually, the municipality completes road maintenance projects that include crack sealing, tar and chip resurfacing, and asphalt milling and paving. The 2018 road resurfacing and gravel road elimination segment includes for tar and chip on Killdeer Road this year, Hickson Road, and a portion of Mercy Road B west of Road 12. And those are shown on Figure 1. The 2018 asphalt segment of the program includes milling and paving of Marlborough Street east from Lutch to Weigel, and Weigel Street from Talbot to Oak Street. We did let 2 separate tenders for this just because the contractors that are available to us. September 20th, we closed tenders for the tar and chip resurfacing program. We received 1 tender from Shepley Road Maintenance for $448,000. They have worked for us in the past, and their prices are similar and in line with the prices they've given us in previous years, so we're recommending that we move forward with that. However, the The total project cost was over what we anticipated. We thought we'd be in the neighborhood of about $170,000 for that work. So we went back and just reevaluated what we wanted to do on Killdeer, and we reduced some of the materials that we're going to put there. And we were able to work with the tenderer to get the price down to just over $167,000. We would also, in consideration of the damages that we're seeing on Road 11, we'd also like to get this contractor to make some repairs on Road 11 in what we estimate to be about $60,000. So the total contract with Shepley would be $477,000. On September 28th, we closed tenders for our asphalt paving contract, and we received submissions from the two paving companies in the area, Millam and Coco Paving. This year, Millam Corporation was the low bidder. They've done work for us in the past and done well. If you have a look at the financial impact section, Table 3, you'll see that the total budget for these works we anticipated was $920,000. We're looking at $486,000 for tar and chip work, $355,000 for asphalt resurfacing. We've had to do some engineering and some pre-work to get ready for that, just over $9,000. So we're expecting our total work this year to be just over $850,000 with a savings of $68,800. And we are recommending that we move forward with a contract with Shepley Road Maintenance and a contract with Millam Corporation.
Thanks, Alan. Real quick for me, this gravel road elimination program has been ongoing for quite some time. We started it way back when the deputy mayor and I were just councillors. So the last time I talked about it, I kind of mentioned that we were done, and then Killdeer Road popped up. So are we done?
My fingers weren't crossed. But,
okay.
We have one more road segment to do, Mercy Road 21. It's 2 concessions long. We were anticipating doing that over 2 seasons.
Yeah. Okay.
And you'll see something in the 2019 budget proposal for that work.
Okay, very good. And you mentioned that, well, knowing Killdeer and some of the issues that we faced on it over the last little bit, when you say that you're changing the materials, causes me a little concern. So what does that mean?
Well, when we put the contract together, we aim high. We anticipated putting in X amount of stone. We're just going to cut it back a little bit just to reduce the tonnage of granular material that we have to put in there. And that it'll be sufficient to do what we need to do. We'll still get 4 inches of new granular in that road. We'll still be able to do what we want to do. We'll just have to take a little more care when we're observing the contractor. And it's just a little less cushion for us.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions from council? Councilor Verbeke? All right, so there's a recommendation before council. What are council's wishes? Moved by Councilor Verbeke, support by Councilor Jacobs. Discussion on the motion. All in favor? Carried. Next report is one regarding sidewalk construction, Oak Street East and Bank Theatre streetscape improvements. Alan?
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. With the completion of the Oak Street East and Weigel Street traffic signal project, it's highlighted the fact that there's no delineated sidewalk in the school area for Queen Elizabeth and École Saint Michel on Oak Street between Ontario and Weigel, and that's a heavily traveled area by students. Children are walking to school, and they're currently walking through commercial driveways with no designated area. So administration's been actively working on a design and a plan to construct sidewalk along the south side of Oak Street East between Ontario and Weigel Street. The residents and the businesses have been notified and are supportive of these works. The businesses such as the former Langman Manufacturing, Joe Reese Appliance, and Dwayne's Auto on the north side have all been consulted, and they do appreciate the need for these works. So if you look in figure 1, you'll see that we're proposing that we would have a sidewalk at the northwest corner of Ontario and Oak, and that will link sidewalk from Ontario down to Oak Street, and will also link sidewalk from Victoria all the way to the new crosswalk at Weigel and Oak Street. And then along the south side, we're proposing that we would construct sidewalk from our trail at the west side, and then we would have a continuous sidewalk easterly all the way to the corner of Weigel and Oak Street, and then there'd be a continuous pedestrian walkway for the students in that area, and we'd complete that segment of our missing links of sidewalks. The second thing we'd like to roll into this contract is some work in front of the Bank Theatre, and you can see that a little bit of that work in figures 2 and 3. Early in 2018, Council approved spending $54,000 of the Main Street revitalization grant from the provincial government to upgrade sidewalk outside of the Bank Theatre to improve the area and ensure that the building is accessible. It's a little bit difficult to see in some of these pictures, but we anticipate removing the sidewalk in front of the Bank Theatre and the Bank Theatre box office, and then in front of the alley just to the north of that, and reshaping it so that we can raise the sidewalk slightly closer to the building so that it can be completely accessible. We'll likely have to put a planter box in there in front of the box office just to make up the grade difference there, but the anticipation is that we would have a brand new sidewalk in front of the entire Bank Theatre and the box office. And then we're also looking at if the contractor is willing to do some additional works in the alley to extend the sidewalk through the alley to make that walkable and accessible. So we combined all this work into one tender package, and we let that. JCS Construction was the low bidder. We haven't worked with JCS Construction in the past, so we did reach out to their references. They received good references from companies like DBI, the City of Windsor Parks and Rec Department, and City of Windsor Operations. So we're comfortable in moving ahead with recommending that we award a sidewalk contract to JCS. We did break down our budget in Table 2 of the financial impact section. We had budgeted $100,000. We got some very good prices, so we anticipate spending just over $53,000 of that. We anticipate spending all of the $54,000 that was set aside for the Main Street revitalization grant for that work in front of the Bank Theatre. So again, we are recommending the council recommend awarding a contract to JCS Construction.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Verbicki.
For the mayor, thanks. The first one, I guess it's an easy one. Looking at the diagrams with Oak Street, that is going right next to the curb.
Yes, it is.
Okay, considering on the left-hand side there, you're going to the trail. And also, what's the slope of that what's the slope of that ramp in front of the Bank Theatre? Because I could see that being an issue. It's a beautiful launch.
I don't know exactly what it finally shook out as for the slopes in front of that, but it meets the accessible, the AOD accessible numbers.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alex.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Alan, I'm looking at the diagram and the textured sidewalk in front of the Bank Theatre, and then I also have the Uptown Master Plan here in hand, and I really like the idea of using the exposed aggregate concrete for portions of sidewalk in our core. Is that a possibility that we're going to do something a little bit more unusual, or are you looking at just plain old concrete? And is the pricing for that?
If you just give me a moment. Alex can help us out with that one.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the pricing is for exposed aggregate in front of the Bank Theatre. So it'll be the same texture, same finish as we're putting on Mill Street.
And Councillor Hammond.
Your Worship, thank you. Concerning the discussions about the Bank Theatre and the sidewalk approach there, the building is not accessible right now. And, because I sit on that committee, we looked at it a number of different ways. to try to make it accessible, and it's virtually impossible without doing the sidewalk renovation that we're asking for. There is a rear door, but that rear door goes out, and we talked about this before, goes out onto someone else's property, and we can't continually use that without asking for permission every time. So I'm also pleased to hear too, Al, that you're going to extend the new sidewalk down in between the two buildings. That interlocking brick there has been there a long time, and it's not in very good shape. So I think it's a great project, and I think that we should move forward on it. And so I'd like to move in support of it.
Okay. Moved by Councillor Hammond, support by Deputy Mayor. Discussion on it. Councillor Jacobs.
Thank you, Worship. Just one quick question to Alan. With the flower box that's you're recommending go in front of that, is that tease up the slope? Will that reduce the width of that sidewalk by a significant amount, or what's the width of that thing?
It looks like the width of the planter is 0.76 meters, and we're still getting 1.8 meters of sidewalk between the planter and the building face, and 0.86 meters between the planter and the back of curb.
Convert that to English. 1.6 meters. That's
So
what,
it's
about 5 feet, 4 feet?
6 foot sidewalk between the planter and the building. The planter itself is probably 2.5 feet wide, and then there will be a remaining piece of sidewalk that's just almost 3 feet wide. So in front of the building, there will be a 6 foot wide sidewalk.
I was concerned about maybe some excessive restrictions, but that sounds good. Thank you.
So, regularly moved and seconded. Further discussion? All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Final report is one regarding the part law control exemption, Destiny Estates Subdivision Phase 3. Danielle.
Good evening, Mayor Patterson, members of council. Administration has received a request from Larry Santos Construction for part lot control approval of lots 21 through 29 within Phase 3 of the Destiny Estates Plan of Subdivision. Destiny Estates Plan of Subdivision received draft approval from the County of Essex in 2012. The owner entered into a development agreement with the municipality in 2014, and the plan now has full approval on all lots in Phases 1, 2, and 3. Phase 1 created 3 single detached lots on the east side of Malibu, and there's 1 lot remaining in that phase. Phase 2 included 14 single detached dwellings located on the west side of Destiny Drive and Alexia Court, and it also created 24 semi-detached units on the east side of Destiny Drive. The owner received part lot control approval for those semi-detached lots in 2017, and it appears that there's only about 6 lots left to be constructed at the very end of that phase. Phase 3 has received final approval from the County of Essex. That was in August of this year. It has been registered as Plan 12M646. It has created 20 single detached lots. Again, those are on the west side of Destiny Drive, as well as an extension to Cherokee Lane. The plan has also created 9 lots on the east side of Destiny Drive, and they will be developed as 18 semi-detached units. Construction of the roads and services in Phase 3 has not yet commenced. Part lot control approval is one of 3 ways permitted to create and convey land, the first 2 being 1 as a whole lot on an approved plan of subdivision, and second by obtaining consent granted by the Committee of Adjustment. Part lot control is most often used to establish the property lines between townhouse and semi-detached units that are located in an approved plan of subdivision. For your information, part lot control is a 2-step approval. First, council must adopt a bylaw which identifies the lots that are exempt from the provisions of the Planning Act. That bylaw will include the requirement that the municipality be provided with a copy of the draft reference plans prior to them being registered, and it will include provisions that the approval will expire on a certain date. If approved, the bylaw is then forwarded to the County of Essex as the delegated approval authority. The final approval will allow the owners to register the deeds for each unit as individual properties and then be in a position to convey the properties into separate ownership. There are no public circulation requirements or appeal rights in consideration of this approval. The municipality is satisfied part lot control approval for lots 21 through 29 on Plan 12M646 is appropriate for the following reasons. The lots are in a designated settlement area. They are in a fully serviced area. The lots proposed are as shown in the phasing plan within the development agreement. The lots comply with the R3 zone requirements. And the bylaw proposed will be subject to an expiry in October 9th of 2021. The recommendation before council this evening is that bylaw 6418 to exempt lots 21 through 29 on Plan 12M 646 from the provisions of the Planning Act be brought forward for consideration, and that the approved bylaw and supporting documentation be forwarded to the County of Essex for final approval.
Thank you, Rich. Questions? Moved by Councillor Jacobs, support by Councillor Wilkinson. Discussion on the motion? All in favor? Carried. Done. Thank you. So now we'll go right back to the beginning to 11.2 and we'll talk about the Leamington Uptown Master Plan. Councillor?
Thank you, Worship. If I may, I know this is like an important document that we're bringing forth. However, with us in the midst of an election and making a decision on this evening, are we committing future council? Are we committing them to something that we're agreeing to? I guess I have a concern in that particular area. I have no objection to going through this tonight, but I don't know if I'm comfortable with accepting the report as a recommendation at that particular point in time. And I think that, again, I guess I'm being cautious of the fact that we're committing other individuals that could possibly be sitting here in the near future to a commitment that they might not agree with. So,
in my personal opinion, I would say every decision we've made leading up to and including tonight is committing a future council to everything we've decided on. So I'm not sure that that's a concern, but I would defer to our Director of Legal and Legislative Services, Ms. Horton. Do you think there's an issue with us formulating a decision on such a plan?
No, I do not. This is really just a roadmap for the future, and any decisions regarding the concrete uptown plans would be made at the relevant time. So those are decisions that can be made then. This is really just the roadmap for planning, for budget in the future years, but the decisions that are on the ground are made at the relevant time.
Councillor?
I respect that, but I guess like reading through the report, and I spent quite a bit of time on it, is the fact that I guess for the major issues or the costly ones, whatever way you want to put it, would come back to council for an okay. However, there's minor ones in there as well. It's like we're talking like maybe bike lanes, and an example would be out here in front of the town hall, almost like that type of bike lane went in, like no one was really familiar with it at that point in time. All of a sudden it was there today. And I guess that's where I'm going with this, that if we accept this, then, and with all due respect, administration going to move forward. However, like that gives them sort of a carte blanche to do the ones that are being recommended that may not be of a cost implication. However, they're still able to go with that, and others may not want that. I guess that's where I'm going with this.
Mr. Neufeld?
I think the difference here is the master plan is something, and in this case in particular, is something that is envisioned to occur over the next 20 years. There will be some details that will have to be ironed out as we get through the next year, 2, 5, 10, 15, and 20. So, for example, the first time we talked about some of this, or perhaps it was even at the public information centers, there was a concern about some of the properties that had been identified for purchase in the eastern part of the municipality. It isn't the intention of the municipality to go out today and purchase those properties, but rather the plan, the long-range plan that is being put onto paper would include consideration of those at the time that they're necessary, which may be in 15 years as opposed to 2 years. So the commitment that you're making is really allowing administration a philosophy around how we are going to move forward. Yes, within the next year, in 2 and 3, and if there is a new council and the particular application of the philosophy to a particular project no longer sits well with the current council, they will have the prerogative of saying, no, we're not going to move forward with that. I think it's important to look at this as Ruth used a roadmap. I'm trying to say it's almost a philosophy that allows administration to now prepare reports around that general idea. You're really not committing future council to a particular project unless we're coming to you right now with that project. You're committing the municipality to some sort of an idea over the next 20 years. And I would suggest maybe even Mr. Toffelmeyer might be able to expand on that concept if it makes council more comfortable.
Councillor?
Again, Mr. Neufeld, I appreciate your comment, but I guess what I'm saying is the fact that some of these recommendations that are being made here could be carried out without coming back to council. The way I interpreted some of the comments or direction that's going in here, and I guess that's where my concern would be. I don't know. I don't know how my fellow councillors feel about this, but to me, we're sort of putting the cart before a horse for a new council. And I would love to discuss this evening. I'm saying we don't need to discuss it, and maybe accept the report. However, I'm hesitant on making any commitment to this report at this time. That's just my feeling at this. I don't know what my fellow councillors think, but.
Deputy Mayor?
I had some of the same reservations as Councillor Jacobs, particularly around the bicycle paths. I thought that would, for me, that would need a whole evening's worth of discussion. I think it would probably give us an hour, hour and a half. And also the community theme of the monarch butterfly. I'm not prepared to commit totally to that. But I would really like to see us go forward with this, to set this, if this sets the stage for the next council, I'm good with that. It may involve these folks coming back again, because if you have 2 or 3 new people, you're going to have to teach them from the bottom up, because this to me is an extensive, it's an extensive roadmap. It's not just one of those simple ones that's just streets and, north, south, east, west designation. I do think that we need to hear it. I hesitate also committing that firm and hard, but I do think we should listen to it, receive it, and put it forward and send direction that it goes to the next council, with some of the things being starred or highlighted that we are not prepared to commit to. Because it does say, for example, that the community theme of the monarch butterfly be approved as a basis for developing landscaping and so on. I'm not prepared to do this in a meeting that's already 8 o'clock. So I know what you mean. I was of the same mind, but I do think we need to move this forward, because it wasn't able to come forward in August. So I do believe we need to hear it and move it forward.
Councillor Jacobs?
Thank you, Worship. I'm not opposed to having it brought forward this evening. I think that's great. It's been a long time coming. I just have reservations as to making a commitment this evening in respect to the changes that could be taking place at this table. So, that's where I stand with this. I just want to make clear.
Councillor Wilkinson?
For Councillor Jacobs, I too had the same thoughts here this weekend. I know where you're coming from. I do. I've made sure that I made special notes, on ones that will get either painted on the ground or concrete poured. When it comes to bike lanes, Rob, Alex, when it comes to bike lanes, bulb outs, we got to be, that has to come back to us. So I've made special mention of that here. And what I would say, if you got some major roadblocks with this report, add it into the literature here and maybe into the recommendation. have your say on it tonight. But I think it's too important of a report to not, go through this exercise here tonight. We got 2.5 hours. Let's get at her and just make sure you make the special notes or add it into the recommendations.
Councillor Verbicki.
Yeah, I guess it's time. In the recommendation, it's all, community consultant, it's implementation. There's a lot of stuff, like it was brought up, that we're not giving a carte blanche tonight, I'm assuming, because there are some issues with the ball boats and moving certain things too. So get it on the books tonight, and let's get at her.
Councillor Hammond.
I'll echo the comments of pretty much all the councillors as well. I mean, like the rest of the committee here, or the rest of the council, I've gone over it a number of times this weekend. I'm not too concerned about moving it forward to another council. I mean, I think this council of the day has got the right to deal with this document. It's in its entirety, but there's enough, in reading through it, there's enough time here to move things to separate areas that other councils will deal with. I'm of the opinion that maybe what we need to do, especially in light of the fact that we're looking at spending in excess of $7 or $8 million, and that can't be taken lightly. And I'm wondering if we shouldn't have and call for, in the very near future, a special night of council just to deal with this very document, and put other business aside until we can try to go through it and formulate more questions. I've got some concerns as well. The first one that pops up for me is moving the tomato to the Dieppe Park, right? So I know in talking to people from the chamber, they don't want that to happen. So that's just a very small example of some of the things that I think are going to be troublesome as we move forward. So.
Okay. If there are no further comments, then I would go to our delegation this evening, and assuming you have some presentation to do to us. Alex?
Through your, Mr. Mayor, I do have the council report. I can go through the council report first, or did you want to go through the presentation?
No, do the council report, and then we'll go.
Okay, so the recommendation before you, there is an amendment to the recommendation. In item 1, the date says June 2018. The actual date on the report is August 2018. I won't go through the entire recommendation, but there is 6 items there for you. In September of 2017, Leamington retained the services of R.C. Spencer Associates to prepare the Uptown Master Plan to address specifically traffic and transportation, pedestrian, bicycle, vehicular, and transit, the needs following principles of a walkable community. The subject plan was intended to build and improve on the update the findings of past planning documents. Those past planning documents were the Monteith Report, the Dillon Report, and the Jones Report. The subject plan is not intended to be an all-encompassing document making zoning, official plan, and CIP recommendations. R.C. Spencer was tasked to take a fresh look at the traffic infrastructure, public spaces, parking needs of the Uptown core using current planning and engineering principles. The master plan will enable Leamington to develop attractive and efficient choices for many people, pedestrians, bicycle, or transit, in concert with automobiles and convenient and accessible parking, and support the previously developed vision for the Uptown area, and that's shown in Schedule A. The goals and the objectives for the Uptown Master Plan were described in the request for proposal, and that Leamington supports the principles of walkable communities and understands that accessibility and walking are important parts of people's daily travel. Particularly, we acknowledge the basic principles of walkable communities to be accommodating consumers, tourists, pedestrians, cyclists, transit, freight, and motor vehicles, reflecting the guidelines set out in the Ontario Traffic Manual, accessibility in terms of the AODA, a mixed-use environment of urban buildings, public spaces, landscapes that support walking, a multimodal network between bicycles, pedestrians, transit, and vehicles, creating relationships between the surrounding land use characters and the right-of-way. The Uptown Master Plan would incorporate generally accepted transportation design principles, the existing CIP, and the walkable community concepts, and make recommendations to achieve a community vision that balances these needs. The main factors which govern or future implementation of the master plan needs to be linked directly to the stages of the capital works plan for sewer separation in and around the study area. Budget resources, long-term capital planning need to provide adequate funding year by year. And by ways of project meetings and extensive public stakeholders program, the consultant defined issues and needs of the uptown area with respect to goals and objectives. The consultant developed alternatives and configurations of traffic lanes, bicycle facilities, sidewalks, on and off-street parking, locations for activity nodes or public spaces, landscaping and construction materials, color schemes, and themes. Particular consideration was given to the general public, property owners, businesses, owners, institutions, and customers. Attention was given to the accessibility for Ontarians with the Disabilities Act, bicycle parking, pedestrians. The various alternatives were evaluated using feedback from stakeholders and sound engineering judgment. The resulting master plan recommendations reflect the uptown vision. R.C. Spencer has provided functional plans that include recommendations for each road segment, parking lots, and public spaces. Of note, the team recognized that it's no longer necessary for most of the uptown to accommodate heavy trucks, and the recommendation posted speed limits should be 30 kilometers per hour. By way of detailed parking study, it was recognized that the street parking spaces have a utilization rate of just under 60%, and off-street parking spaces have weekday utilization of 70% and weekend utilization of 23%. Generally accepted guidelines suggest that parking is considered at a capacity at 85%. In support of walkable communities, 6 pedestrian corridors were identified. They're listed for you. The consultant has provided high-level cost estimates for the recommended surface works for the use for capital planning. And the financial impact is that Leamington Uptown Master Plan will be phased over numerous years. R.C. Spencer has provided a cost estimate based on current 2017 unit prices and include only surface works, pavement, sidewalks, curb and gutter, and landscaping. Trees and plantings, sod, decorative walls, and furnishings. All costs will be refined based on the detailed design. There will be additional costs for final design, sewer separation, or any required utility relocations.
Thanks very much. Before we go on, are there any questions for Alex? Not?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. It's good to be here tonight, and I'm with my colleagues Ron Cowdes, our landscape architect, Tracy Pilanabs, our planning consultant, and I want to acknowledge Mr. Aaron Blada, my colleague at R.C. Spencer, for all of the work that they have all done on this report. As Alex has noted, it was about a year ago that we were retained and we commenced work on this very important milestone study, really. We're happy to be here with our results tonight. We were under the gun, if you want to put it that way, to prepare things rather quickly because of the need to move forward with the Mill Street project, which is now well underway. And so most of the work was done early on so that that project would reflect the kind of ideas and principles that we have developed through this study. I know that many of you have, all of you stopped by, and so we've had a good process. And I'd like to keep this discussion tonight at a high level. There was an earlier discussion about that. It is a strategic type of study. There is nothing in this report nor our recommendations that would preclude you from approving it, because we're recommending that everything be subject to further review before being implemented. And you can review the recommendations at the end of the report. And I'll ask Ron to provide you with a discussion on the theme of the monarch butterfly when we get to that. They entrusted me with the clicker. Mr. Mayor, members of council, I'd like to spend a little bit of time on this because it sets the stage at a high level with the big picture type of of analysis, and this is really where we began our work. Thank you. This picture highlights some interesting connections. The idea here was to locate geographically the areas where people are coming, either by foot or by vehicle or what have you. So in the blue, you'll see the parking lots generally. In the orange, you will see areas where people attend and assemble, such as the churches, the Bank Theater, the gaming area, the post office, the arts center, the funeral home, and so on. And in the green, you'll see public spaces. So we have all of the parks, Selkirk Park, and the Shot and Parquet, and Dieppe Park, and so on. And so when you step back, I also located on there the gateways, the locations of the obelisks that now identify entering into the uptown area. And what do you notice from that? Well, I thought it was very instructive to note that Erie Street and Talbot Street don't have a lot going on in those colored blotches. They're all around different streets, and I connected them using those dotted lines, the dashed lines. I think that's really helpful because those are the lines we are interested in creating pedestrian corridors. They connect across those streets, of course, but they connect public spaces, parking lots, and places of assembly. And you can see the corridors kind of jump out at you when you look at it at that level. The second thing I wanted to hearken back to was when I was a kid, Talbot Street was the main corridor and access into it, and it's the reason why the Big Tomato was located where it is, because there was no Highway 401 when it was built. Highway 3 was the main connection to the Niagara area and for tourism and so on, and was the major, you can look at the traffic volume information, it was the major entry point. That's not that way anymore. It's no longer Highway 3 there, and Highway 77 to the 401 is the major connector, and the main access into the Leamington uptown area is now in a north-south direction for various reasons. And so that is another thing that helps us reframe when we're looking at the uptown area and the connectiveness that we need to develop. The second, or another aspect that pops out here is the lack of public facilities, assemblies, anything really in the northeast quadrant. Now that Town Hall is here and not where it used to be, there are not any, there's the Anglican Church that shows up in there, but there's nothing else of a public space nature, parking lots, anything of that nature. So what that tells us is the opportunity for future development to sort of close the circle comes forward in that northeast quadrant. And that's a good thing. I'm going to ask Tracy to very briefly discuss the background reports. I want to point out that this study itself has a foundation in these planning studies. It is not itself a planning report, and there will be a feedback loop, as we've recommended, a feedback loop into the planning process that would allow you to revise, review, revamp, and incorporate any good points that would come from this and flow into the process. So I'll ask Tracy to just review the planning documents there.
Thank you, John. So the master plan built upon existing work completed over almost 20 years. The 3 reports that Alex mentioned were reviewed, and as John mentioned, they were the creation of a foundation for this particular project. We wanted to build on existing efforts that council and the municipality has had over several years. And in summary, the Monteith report identified the original themes and design characteristics of the uptown core. Studies included open space, pedestrian linkages, traffic, parking needs. It supported originally residential development over the top of the stores, and it originally had a facade loan program when it was first originally launched. The Dillon report then built from the Monteith report and implemented phased strategies, which associated some cost estimates at the time. It was determined that there were some preferred designs, some concepts, and individual sketch drawings were included as part of that review. Significant work actually had been completed, including some roadway improvements. The entire lighting was changed, benches, garbage recycling. They were all updated and matched with a specific theme. Now they are showing their age now as well, and this is a good time to take a look at those. The third report was the Jones report. It built on those first 2 reports and took it to the next level, and it developed an urban design guideline which suggested color palettes. It created a community improvement program which included the grants so that we could have private sector investments into their properties. It identified ways to preserve the heritage designations and some techniques that can be recommended as part of heritage designations. It identified some municipal revitalization programs which can be used as tools, and they are currently in progress. And they included some of the items like the new gateway features. Other plans were taken into consideration, such as the active transportation plan, the official plan, and zoning bylaw, but only at a high level. It was made very clear from the beginning that council did not want this to be a planning exercise. It wanted to be more of a fresh look exercise with respect to building on those foundations and taking a look more at a pedestrian level of development. So I'll pass it back to John.
Okay, thank you. This slide is, I do not intend to go through this slide in detail. I just wanted to include it to ensure you and through administration that we followed the comprehensive study approach, which is in line with the terms of reference and also best practices. And we work closely with administration throughout the process. We carried on a really successful community consultation program. In particular, I want to acknowledge the help and participation of the BIA. I think they're represented here tonight in the gallery. And we developed a really positive relationship. We had stakeholder meetings at different times. We met also with the Accessibility Committee. We had 2 public information centers, one in November, one in January. They were well attended. They were interactive. There was a lot of feedback and follow-up, which we took into account. And also we had a drop-in center that we did for spontaneous feedback at our office on Talbot Street West. And I know that all of you had a chance to stop in, and that kind of informal feedback, one-on-one or small groups, was really helpful, and we thought that that was a very good success. The appendix of our report contains a summary of all of that consultation. So as a result of that, and as a result of the terms of reference provided by administration, we did look at these various issues to be examined in more detail in our study. The first and a very important one is the whole notion of accessibility, walkability, active transportation, that includes consideration of the AODA considerations, the bicycle patterns, and pedestrian crossings, and so on. And so we used that and the details associated with that in terms of technical guidelines to create the design plans for sidewalks and crossings and so on. The other issues relate to the spaces and activity nodes. That's really a representation of the slide with all the colored blobs on it, of the corridors that we were trying to incorporate in our plan. Business access is important for goods movement as well as for access of customers, of course. But one of the things that falls out of it is the need to promote access for goods movement into the uptown area along Talbot Street rather than along Erie Street from the East Editorial Road. And there are a number of ways of doing that, whether it's through speed limit reductions, whether it's through signage, marketing and promotion, and participation of the BIA themselves to ensure that that truckers know and deliveries know to come that way and provide that kind of relief for access in. And that has a feedback loop into the kind of design that you can prepare for Talbot Street and for Erie Street. As far as traffic patterns and operations, we used existing road classifications, existing master plans, existing operations as the base, and tweaked it, if more than anything, to create the recommended plan. Parking is always an issue in commercial districts such as Uptown Leamington, and I think Alex covered it in his administrative report. We tried to maintain a balance of on and off street parking, and if I could use one word that drove our designs and ideas in this regard, it is balance. Balance between on and off street parking, balancing the needs for auto accessibility by car, pedestrian safety, pedestrian crossings, bicycle safety, and bicycle facilities, and trying to balance those things in a reasonable way in the uptown area. So that is what drove our considerations in creating the plan. Landscape architecture and community themes. I forgot safety and security. We met with the Ontario Provincial Police staff about their community safety initiatives and integrated that kind of thinking into our work as well. Later in our presentation, I'll ask Ron to speak to the landscape architecture and the community themes aspects of it, and we'll have time to get into those in a little more detail in a few minutes. I'm going to pass it back to Tracy to take us through the planning considerations in regard to the next few slides.
Again, it was a high-level review that was undertaken of the planning documents. It was an exercise looking at how we can provide a fresh look as the focus. So some of the considerations that we do recommend in the master plan are as follows. With respect to the official plan, we have made some recommendations on how to strengthen the role and function of the uptown core, identify how it's unique and what role it will be playing for the vision of the official plan. We do understand that Council is undertaking your 5-year official plan comprehensive review, So we didn't make any specific policies. We kept it very general so that there will be something that you'll be able to come back to in the future and take a look. Again, as John mentioned, there are no decisions being made with respect to policy changes. You'll have an opportunity to review that in more detail at a later date. But they do include some items like promoting walkability and cycling. That actually is very silent in the official plan currently. And finding that balance, again, between linking your community open space and some of your private sector space. Once the official plan policies are established, the town will then be able to focus on your zoning bylaw standards and regulations. That's really when you get into the very, very detailed items on how to regulate uses and activities and outdoor storage, balconies, parking, and so on. So there are no changes at this time because, again, we want council to be able to take your time at that zoning review and spend a little bit more time on how you think that those should be regulated. It's also understood that council is considering a review of the current CIP in the near future. Again, so those recommendations were very high level, and that will give council an opportunity to review your document in more detail later. So the next slide. So specifically in this community improvement plan, there were several revitalization programs that were identified currently, and our team had considered each of those items, and it was concluded that they were all very relevant. They were all reaching the same vision of creating that unique identity to the uptown core. Council's encouraged to continue on that path to incorporate the ideas, and those ideas included such things as public art initiatives, like the butterfly mural is identified in your current CIP, the public and private partnership program, for example, the Gregory Building, the private lot improvement programs, which included paving of lots, and the build-out program, which includes Main Street. The next slide. Other projects include demolition permit requirements, dealing with vacant lots, that still is on the right track and still has some potential for improvement, and possibly theme lighting designs over alleys. And Ron will explain a little bit more on how you can utilize those tools on making some of the areas shown in the images on the screen more vibrant and more pedestrian friendly, more safe, more secure, and bring them into the activities as opposed to just being shortcuts to parking lots. So the master plan will launch the town into that next level of community improvement in order to be able to achieve that goal of having a fresh look.
So on the basis of that background, we set to trying to put some form to that on a plan. We worked in three general areas, main components, to put this together. The first being the public spaces, the second being the pedestrian corridors, and the third being the shopping streets. So I try to give some order to the presentation. They overlap, obviously they overlap, and so we're trying to go through the overall plan in this way to give it some order, but there will be some overlap. And I'll ask Ron to chip in. The three public spaces that we examined in the most detail, the Big Tomato and Leamington Arts Center area, the Shot and Parquet, and the library. Now we actually have more detailed plans a little bit later in the presentation, and I don't know, Ron, it might be easier if you want to give some general comments at this point, or you want to wait. I think it's better to wait, and we'll show you the actual details as they come up a little bit later on the corridors. The pedestrian corridors, we talk about the Mill Street, Queens Corridor, the John Street Nelson Corridor, and the Princess Wellington. I think if we have this plan is the overall master plan. And if you go to the connecting the dots, I don't want to hit. So the circle that we ended up with from the previous original slide, this pedestrian corridor, this pedestrian corridor, this pedestrian corridor, and Mill Street. Do you want to comment, Ron, on some of the features of those corridors in terms of the landscaping?
Yeah, the beauty of the corridors, as John's described them, is that they provide a ring around the core of the uptown district. And they are largely already established as patterns within the community. They are easily incorporated at fairly reasonable costs. And by establishing a landscape that's consistent throughout those corridors, we begin to draw attention to them. One of the key principles that we worked with in developing the landscape solutions was a principle known as CPTED, CPTED, crime prevention through environmental design. So looking carefully at lighting as one feature, making sure there are eyes on the spaces, not creating opportunities for lurking or inappropriate use, were all foundations of our recommendations that you'll see later on today. In addition, we began to develop a palette of furniture that would be placed along these corridors that, again, would provide harmony and linkage. Things like benches and garbage cans and so on. And we've used some very innovative seating solutions that are flexible and adaptable to different uses and activities that might occur within these corridors that I'll be showing you a little later on. One of the primary things that landscape architects do is try to create environments where trees will survive. And in downtowns, heavy urban areas, that's not always an easy thing to do. Where we've really failed in the past has been not providing adequate rooting zone for these trees. So I'll be showing you a little later on some concepts that we've developed that have been proven in other municipalities that will ensure the trees that are planted not only survive but do well and create the images of a pedestrian-friendly, shady streetscape as well. I think those are some of the basic principles. I'll come back to details a little later.
I want to back up. The final major structural component are the shopping streets, and of course these include Mill Street, Talbot Street East and Talbot Street West, Erie Street North and Erie Street South, and the principal features that end up being manifested in them are sidewalk widenings, but I want to just make this point very clear. There's very little impact on on-street parking when you do this. You can go out right now on the street and see the wheel tracks, the darker areas where the cars will travel. And you'll see a lighter shade of pavement adjacent to the curb, for example, where the cars are turning. That area is just available for a guy like Ron to come and provide some streetscaping onto it. It does not affect the traffic at all. There's another area that's very obvious. In fact, council approved to put bike racks on Talbot Street East right at the foot of Shotton Park, beginning of Shotton Parkette. That area is a dead area and is a candidate for a sidewalk widening. When you do that, you improve the environment, you slow down the traffic, you provide a safer crossing because it's much shorter. And so those are the kinds of considerations that we used to develop the actual curb line design, and that's what is going to be reflected. You'll see right there. You can see everywhere. And I also want to make one other point. These bulb outs ought to look quite familiar because they're exactly the same design as what you have on Nelson Street right now, beside the old town hall. There's no change in that, and the principles that were applied there are the same ones that are applied here. That really forms the basis of these streets here. Same thing here, Erie Street. Now this plan is based on more or less the status quo, which includes the approved active transportation plan, which is a shared bicycle route. There's not a bike lane in this plan. There's not a bike lane on Talbot Road either. In fact, overall, there's only one spot where there's a true bike lane being proposed, and that is to continue the existing bike lanes on Fox Street to bring it up to Talbot and complete the system in this area. Everywhere else, it is a shared bicycle route, assigned route. I want to make one other comment on the shopping streets, because this area, I didn't talk about it earlier, this area here, remember I mentioned about the void in public spaces in this general area here? There's also a void in parking. So what we're suggesting is creating a corridor along the Princess Wellington corridor by creating a public parking facility here, which allows streetscaping and visual enhancement and connectivity, and actually completes the circle around the core of the uptown area. We want to take it down one more notch of detail, and I'll pass it over to Ron again to speak to Mill Street. I'll speak then to Queens Avenue, and then I'll give it back to Ron to talk about the library corridor on John Street.
Just before I talk a little bit about the detail on Mill Street, John asked me to talk about theme. You recall there was a Monteith report done in 1998, 20 years ago. I was the landscape architect on that. I was a lot younger then, but I was the landscape architect on that project as well. And we talked a lot about theme. Why is theme important? When people visit this community or live in this community, expressing the values and the character of place make your municipality distinctive, your town unique. And so at that time we talked a lot about what is there that's unique about this community, Leamington. And we looked at a whole range of different ideas. One that we proposed at that time was the monarch butterfly. Now, at that time, pollinators and the whole idea of the monarch was not as popular as it is today. And it's interesting how over this period of time, these 20 years, the monarch sits in everyone's mind as an important element of our natural systems, as our environment. And so we brought that forward again. And it's interesting, the comments that came from council tonight, that this is certainly something we want to talk about and debate. But I would want to emphasize how important having that theme is to distinguishing the unique character of this community from others. And then embedding that, whatever that feature becomes, as a detail that's discovered in the landscape, perhaps a detail on the garbage cans or incorporated into the benches, emblazoned on the sidewalks, and so on. So it doesn't have to be in your face, an aggressive kind of thing, more something that's subtle and carefully detailed so people discover it and reinforces your sense of who you are and what the values of this community really are. And all of that is really manifested and amplified in the uptown. When people visit Leamington, it's the uptown. That's their destination often, and it's what they take away from the community when they leave. So we want to make a really strong, positive impression. And our thought was that the Monarch was one option to consider to capture that. Okay, on to Mill Street. So here, in developing Mill Street, we developed a flex street approach. Flex street meaning that it has multiple uses, that it becomes potentially a center for activity and municipal events where the community gets together and has festivals, or you might close a street for a sidewalk event. This may be where marathon races organize and meet, and you start off from this location, that kind of thing. So in the development of Mill Street, we looked at ways to make it both functional from a vehicular point of view, but also from time to time, the vehicle can be eliminated from that street and pedestrians can take it over. So there's a continuous character of pavement from one side to the other. The curbs are not barrier curbs, and the landscape sort of bridges through the whole space, creating more of an urban park kind of feel. There would be bollards, vertical posts placed at the entrances to Mill Street in times when you want the vehicles excluded. But they're removable, so in the normal day-to-day operation, they wouldn't be there. I'm just trying to get there. We go. So there's the street. We eliminated parking on the one side only, and then increased the amount of sidewalk that occurs on that side. Much of the streetscape experience happens on that north side, and we have a number of groupings of trees, groupings of seating features that I'll be showing more detail of later, and it ties into the parquet that leads up through here. So it becomes a continuous sort of park space. The idea in this design is that it's also reflective of the activities that are happening in the buildings adjacent. So it's not just something that's laid out without careful consideration for the functionality of the space as well. So buildings that had food services, restaurant kinds of uses, we'd have seating spaces and tables outside for them to use, and expand the activity right out into the street itself. I think I'll pause there. This is the general approach.
The Winter Garden.
Oh, sorry. John just reminded me that one of the thoughts we had was for this corner, which is sort of the termination of this line of sight through Shelton Park here, down to this space. And the concept that we were developing was one of a winter garden. Certainly, everybody understands that greenhouses are an important part of this community, and a growing part, both literally and figuratively. But what we thought could happen here is a greenhouse structure that had more of a horticultural experience on the inside that could function as a destination in the wintertime as well. We've built a very similar facility in London, and it's very popular in the wintertime for meetings, for weddings, and all kinds of events. So it actually it's difficult to get a booking there. So it's a revenue generator as well. And the thought was that a landscape could be developed around that building that was filled with lush greenery and really enhance the perception of green as you drive through the town.
I just want to back up one slide in order to show you, illustrate to you an interesting feature about accessibility to Mill Street. I want to show you from this plan that if you look at the walking distance from this corner of the Queens parking lot through the Shotton Parkette to Mill Street, It's actually a shorter distance than if you're parked here and have to walk across and down the street to that same spot. I mean to say by that, that if the business community, and I know they're aware of this now, the business community can start promoting the parking supply generally in the downtown, in the uptown area, not just say, well, if you're coming to Mill Street, park here. If you're coming to Mill Street, park here. There's a good supply of parking, and it's all convenient. And one of our objectives in these pedestrian corridors is to improve that, improve the walkability of it, improve the experience of it, and that's just one example. It does lead to another concept for accessibility through these properties into the parking lot and also along the back alley into this area here. There is a green space now, the former Village Inn, and it provides an opportunity for access into the Mill Street community. So those were also considerations in our design in that area. If we move up to Queens Avenue, we looked at a couple of options on Queens. This being the one we did not choose. You can see in the plan, the overall plan, there we go. The idea is to provide a similar streetscape on the east side of Queens, as Ron just spoke about on Mill Street. In other words, eliminate the parking lane along here on the east side, put angle parking on the other side. You actually pick up a couple parking spaces. There's more parking in this scenario than there is at the present. And then you have an opportunity to encourage the pedestrian corridor. You have an opportunity for additional streetscaping and making the environment a little nicer. I included this to indicate to you that we did look at alternatives, but this is not the one that we are preferring. I'll give the mic back to Ron. This is the area in front of the library, and as I indicated earlier, this is an important east-west pedestrian corridor as well, and we have ideas.
So you can see this is the library building here. The church is over here. This is the existing laneway runs through here, and it's two-way, the existing lane. The proposal is to change this so that it's a one-way lane coming into the parking lot, which would be reconfigured here, which buys us a little bit of extra room. In the middle of the park is the fountain that was donated by the Italian community, I believe. And I've spent the last 15 years lecturing in the northern part of Italy, so I've been influenced by the piazza, the experience of a gathering place for the community. And that's what we've incorporated here, keeping many of the existing trees, but expanding the space so that it's more visible to the traffic passing by, organizing the parking on the west side, keeping the trees that run along the existing building that's here, and increasing the amount of pavement with lots more benches and a very restful passive space that uses the fountain, which is a little cramped in the space that it is right now, open the space up and make it feel more in scale. Right across the street is this beautiful big oak tree as well, so we're sort of bridging across there. And in many ways, this location is where the more historic aspect of the uptown begins. And so using the park as a reinforcement of the gateway experience made a lot of sense to us.
As we continue, there's one last significant design issue that we were presented with, and that is what to do with Erie Street. The active transportation master plan that you have approved provides for shared bike routes here. The trick with a shared bicycle route, not a separated lane, not an off-road anything, the bicycles share the road with the traffic. The trick is to convince the drivers of the cars to slow down, and you do that by constricting the perceived width of the street. That is what is achieved with the bulb outs. So in this case, the plan shows the narrowing in those dead areas I spoke about earlier, right at the library. Narrow the street down where people don't drive at the moment. Make that sidewalk, make that landscaping space, and so the drivers feel that friction, if you like, and they slow down. You have other tools, speed limits. The ITE recommendation for walkable urban centers like this is a speed limit of 30 kilometers, an operating speed of 30 kilometers an hour. That's a very reasonable number, and that is one which encourages comfortable bicycle riding, sharing the space with the vehicles. When you combine that with retaining on-street parking, you add the business ambiance, the landscaping, and so on, you create an atmosphere that's attractive, that calms the traffic, and that is safe for everyone, and then you intersperse with pedestrian crossings at the strategic locations, at Nelson Street, for example, at John Street, and so on. We have, however, included in our recommendation plans that show what you can do if you wish to up the ante in favor of bicycles. So we have a plan that shows a bike lane. We have a plan that shows a bicycle track. A bicycle track is a separated, a lane is adjacent to the vehicle lane. A bicycle track is basically fully separated as if it were its own little roadway. And so there are alternatives along both of those lines that are presented for your consideration. One of the things that's happening in the industry right now is that it is very fluid. There is still a lot of debate going on about what's the best thing to do. I want to emphasize for Leamington, we are not doing this for a target group of the migrant workers who are clearly enjoy and are reliant on their bicycles, but not at all only for that. The active transportation industry is burgeoning, it's growing. The youth are embracing the bicycle. There are huge eco-tourism opportunities. We're benefiting from that already through the countywide active transportation strategy, and we can piggyback onto that as well with enhanced active transportation facilities. And so there's a lot happening in terms of design work and design concepts, and so we've left this open in our recommendations for another go-round of a detailed design nature, or more detailed design nature, in the future. We do not see this in the staged implementation as happening on Erie Street for a while, so you have lots of time to consider in more detail the nature of the active transportation that you wish there. But the base plan is what we've presented in our overall plan, is a shared facility. The one trade-off that happens when you go into these types of dedicated bicycle facilities, either the bike lane or the bike track, is that you do sacrifice on-street parking. There's not room for both. If you are able to share the traffic, then you can retain the on-street parking and create a balance. And the numbers for that are in the report in terms of comparisons at that level of detail. So, this brings us now to the final major segment of the report, which is the streetscape concepts and designs. And again, I'll pass it over to Ron.
So here we have some visual imagery showing what was proposed for Mill Street and is currently under construction, but also the palette of materials that we were recommending for the Uptown District. This looking down Mill Street, showing some of the bike racks. These are concrete pillows. They weigh about 200 pounds. So people can't pick them up and move them around easily, but you can relocate them as events happen on the street. We use them rather than bollards or other types of features, and they serve for seating as well as to deflect the traffic when it's open for the cars to pass through. Here you can see some of the benches that we're using. There's a proposal to convert this into a food service location. So we have a series of tables that sit along the street here, fairly close, a very functional sort of restaurant kind of space. I thought with these are like Adirondack chairs, but they're made of metal, and they're very, very durable. The problem with a bench, if you have a bench that may seat 3 people or 4 people, one person sits there, nobody else will sit there because that person's laid claim to that space. So by putting these chairs here instead, it encourages interaction. A person can sit here, there's an empty chair next to them, they'll sit down and begin a conversation. These are available in bright colors and really brighten up the streetscape as well. We also have more traditional benches, and in selecting the furniture palette, we looked carefully at what the Uptown architectural character was. And there's an interesting blend of older Victorian-type buildings with more modern buildings. So rather than going to a contemporary style or an old heritage Victorian style, we've selected something that's more traditional, and I believe very durable. And in 10 or 15 years' time, we're not going to look at this and say, yeah, that was popular back then, not so much now. We're using tree grates. Actually, the ones that we've specified are twice this size. They're metal grates that sit on the ground. The tree comes through them. And underneath is a large area for root volume. The general rule is 600 cubic feet of rooting volume per tree. And in a little grate like this, there certainly is not enough volume to support the tree's health. So the material that we're using was developed in Cornell University. It's a blend of gravels and topsoil that's put in place and can be compacted, so you can put a road or pavement on top of it. But the roots from the trees grow through the voids between the particles of stone. The stone particles are about 2.5 inches in size. We've used this in a number of locations. It's been in the industry about 25 years now, and it's showing very good results at an affordable cost. There are other solutions that are much more expensive, so we're recommending this as the best way to proceed. The seating areas where there are food opportunities are fixed in place and bolted to the ground, so these aren't being moved around. Here we're showing some of the tree solutions that we were talking about. Ideally, trying to find islands or openings where there's enough soil volume or breakout opportunities. So we might look at a tree placed adjacent to the street and then an opportunity to go into the sidewalk and root in a lawn area, maybe in front of somebody's front yard. When we're dealing with this kind of in-street situation, all of this area under the sidewalk would be designed with that CU soil that I talked about, Cornell University soil, that would allow for this tree to grow properly. The trees that we've selected are locust trees, oak trees, linden trees, and hackberries, all native trees that will tolerate the kind of environment that we're looking at. And in addition, there's some beautiful planters in the Uptown District. We'd encourage continuing that relationship and placing lots of colorful seasonal displays. And then the smaller bench I talked about earlier. And then for lighting, the lighting choices that we've selected, we put this image in. This is not the light that was ultimately selected, but this illustrates the contemporary dark sky compliant lighting, so there's no light going up into the upper atmosphere, all reflected downwards and using LED systems. And it was nice to hear the comment about the exposed aggregate. We've been using exposed aggregate for many years now in all kinds of settings. I find it allows us to do some patterning with bands of texture, introducing color. This is actually the Goodwill in London. It's been there about 5 or 6 years now. It's standing up really well. And you don't have the problems with shifting of paving stones and those kinds of things. But it has a fresh look, and it's easily power washed and restored. John, back to you.
Okay. So, at the end of the work, we were able to put together some preliminary cost estimates, and we also identified segments of the project that could be consolidated and staged. Now, our recommendation is very simple. You're going to stage these things in accordance with your budget constraints and with your sewer separation program. But for presentation purposes in our study, we basically went clockwise, starting at Mill Street, because that's where we did start. We like the idea of moving along the Shot and Parquet, because it's sort of halfway there right now, and continuing up Queens, come across to the library and get that corridor done, continue round the Horn into the northwest quadrant and so on. So that's the basis of it. It's not any more scientific than that, to try and separate out projects that make sense to come together, and then moving in that kind of clockwise process. So skipping to the bottom line, you end up with a total program in terms of surface works of about $7.5 million, and landscaping in the order of $1.5 million. So you're into the area of $9 million or so in terms of our current dollars. We suggest that this is a master plan. We're not here to do the financial planning associated with this at this point, but merely to block it out so that you know what you're faced with. The mayor and Mr. Neufeld made comments earlier about the nature of master planning being long-term, and you can think in terms of 20 years. My favorite example is the East Side Arterial Road, because that was in a plan in 1988, and it came to fruition 20 years later. You can look at the Gordie Howe Bridge, which I was a part of 25 years ago, and so these are master plans. They take a long time to happen, but the idea is they set a standard or a goal, and you can meet that inch by inch if you like. The idea is to be consistent and continuous in your approach, and that's the benefit of having a master plan. I don't want to dwell on these. That's the basic bottom line number right there. If you wish, the more detailed numbers are in there segment by segment. This is the implementation strategy I spoke of. Generally speaking, starting at Mill Street, going clockwise, and trying to be reasonable in linking things together. It brings us to our conclusions, which are our recommendations. We are recommending that the plan that has been before you several times through the presentation be the approved in principle as a basis for future infrastructure improvements, not as the future infrastructure improvements, as a basis for future infrastructure improvements, property acquisition, road sidewalk reconstruction, traffic operations, and beautification. The Erie Street corridor, as I mentioned, we recommend that that be taken out and looked at in a more detailed analysis with regard to the most appropriate balance for bicycle facilities. We recommend integrating the staged implementation of this plan with your capital program for storm and sanitary sewer separation. That the detailed design of each project, and I think this also goes a long way to answering some of the concerns at the beginning of the meeting, include a detailed design, include community consultation for input into the final design, and a review of MTO Book 18. That's the technical document that I mentioned is sort of fluid. There's still a lot happening in the general area of bicycle infrastructure. That the items listed as planning considerations, and this is what Tracy spoke to earlier, we recommend these being incorporated as items for future review as you proceed through your reviews and updates of the planning documents. And that the community theme of the monarch butterfly, as Ron has described, be approved as a basis for developing landscaping and design features and street furniture, public art, and accents, and some of that is already in place as well. So, thank you for your attention. We are certainly available to try and answer any questions, and we appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you very much, John. Councillor Verbicki.
Thank you, worthy Mayor. I think I want to be the first one tonight to say a stellar report. Wow, 62 bulb outs. Well, that's not why I'm talking. I don't want to, we'll talk about that later. I want to talk about the 6 new crosswalks you're proposing on page 2 of the big documents. I'm happy to see that the crosswalk from the library to the old town hall, and then south of John Street to where the Crave restaurant is, Princess to Wellington, Russell Street to in front of the church there, the Fox Street parking lot to the church, and the one that I love is the crosswalk on Talbot to the Royal Bank. Now, I was always told, and we've asked this before because I'm not a professional, that all these crosswalks have to be signaled. So are you telling me we're putting up new 6 PXOs or 6 new stoplights, or?
Well, thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. The real answer is we don't know yet. These are locations, they are not designs, but generally speaking, I would say these would most likely be not traffic signals, but PXOs, the new standard, the new kind. There are 4 versions of that. Some of them you'll see around town have flashing lights. Those are determined by a combination of traffic volumes and width and other considerations. Some of them, such as the one just behind here on Queens Avenue, has no flashing signals, but it relies on people knowing about the Highway Traffic Act and the cars having to yield to pedestrians at those locations. So there's a detailed design process that would have to be gone through at each of those locations to determine the appropriate design. But I would say, generally speaking, there will not be traffic signals.
Wait, Mayor, one more. That's other than Leamington, that's drivable within 2 hours. Where are all, I mean, it was a great plan on paper with the bulb outs on Danforth, and it's just beginning to be a nice racetrack in the summertime for motorcycles just leaning. Where else can we look to see these other bulb outs within the 5 counties?
Oh, thank you. That's a hard question for me. I pointed to this one here because it's exactly what we have right now on Nelson Street. Okay. I think that I can't, off the top of my head, I'd have to do a little bit of research to find out. You got some ideas? Bell River?
Like a lot of Bell River, like a major street?
Oh, yeah, Notre Dame Street, like the main stretch
Okay.
of Bell River is done up just like that.
Mr. Mayor, I do not see much parallel in terms of the design here as compared to Danforth Street. This is not the same type of traffic operational issue here. If you'll look and see the continuous nature and connectivity of the traffic lanes and not a stop sign when then you shift over. So it's quite a different situation. We've been quite mindful of maintaining efficient traffic operations, and generally speaking, the bulb outs, as I have said a couple times, occur in areas where there's no traffic conflict at that point.
Thank you, and I'm just gonna wrap up, and I got a couple more, but a bulb out is a bulb out. You know, and it's creating havoc there at the corner of Pulford with the buses. I know the traffic design is different, and it's hard to, you know, hindsight's 20/20, but never mind, it's okay.
Councillor Dunn?
Through you, Your Worship. I do like the overall plan. I like the idea of the improved architecture and our different scaping. But my concern is also what Councillor Verbicki said about trying to control speed by constricting the road. And as it referred, I know you said it's not Danforth, but when people want to speed, they have a habit of going fast anyway. And even trying to reduce the speed, how are we going to enforce that? My also concern is with the bulb outs is that you get the bikes going up beside you, and there's one at the end of Park Street. It's a bulb out at the end of that street, and as you pull out the car itself, there's no way a bike could be beside you. That concerns me. It might be constricting it a little bit too much. So there's just a little bit, I mean, re-looking at some of the things to make sure that we are going to accomplish what you're trying to do.
At the risk of being repetitive, Mr. Mayor, my main point in regard to the safety issues and the idea of having a shared bicycle route in mixed traffic is to key on the speed of all of the traffic and to do things in a mindful way that give a driver the impression that, you know, he needs to control the speed. That's the key variable in the safety equation. So I don't know specifically the location that you're speaking of, but for example, we still have a lot of on-street parking in this plan. So cars are going to be parking as they do now in out of a traffic lane and pulling back into a traffic lane, and the traffic lane is going to continue to contain bicycles, which we hope the whole mix of that is a safer operation with this plan. We know that the perception of a driver has nothing to do with what the speed limit sign says. It has to do with how the driver's brain interprets the environment and creates the speed that he's comfortable with, okay? And so the trick is to use landscaping techniques, pavement textures, pavement markings, ambience, street cafes. You know, Mill Street is not going to be the same when it reopens here in a few months as it has been for all of our time, okay? It's going to be a different experience driving down Mill Street. And so it's that kind of urban design that we're relying on, that we have to rely on, in order to create the safe environment. This is not 1962, where Highway 3 is Michigan cars going to Niagara Falls, okay? This is now a focal point, create an entire environment for Uptown Leamington as a destination where people can easily find accessible parking, maybe on the street, maybe more likely in an off-street parking lot, and get out and walk in an enjoyable environment along an identified corridor that's safe and green, and places of shade, a place to stop and get a cold beverage, places to shop and enjoy their experience. That's kind of what we're after as a destination, not cars driving through to get to Niagara Falls, okay? So that's kind of the flavor of where we are trying to head with this. Our only tool is, you know, the curb space and the paint and such. We cannot get into people's heads, can't control their you know, their driving habits and the kind of car they drive or anything. But we can use these external influences through our urban design to create an environment that leads in that direction.
I'm actually very excited about Mill Street. That, to me, we have a meeting place, like you said, for night markets and things like that. That very much excites me. I'm just concerned on the main roads. I know you're trying to control the automobile driver, but not always, and I'm sorry the Danforth thing keeps coming back. It just seems to be a speed and they're racing back and forth. So we have to be cautious in how we go about doing it to make sure it's best for everybody. That's all I'm saying.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a few. Okay, John, so page 49 here, you got a breakdown of street parking on street and off street, what we're going to lose and what we're going to be adding. Page 49 towards the top of the plan. That number there where we're going to lose 32 on-street parking spots, that would be under alternative plan number 3, correct? Where the bike track would be installed. Am I right with that?
Okay. Are you referring to a page number in the big report?
Yeah, the master plan.
What page are you on?
Page 49.
49?
Yes. I got a few here, so you're going to want to keep that out.
Oh, okay. All right. A net reduction of on-street spaces of about 32 spaces?
Right.
Okay. 18 of those are actually on the north side of Mill Street, so that leaves 14 more.
Okay.
In the overall plan, and this is that plan there, okay, we lose, I think, 4 or 5 on south side of John Street across from the library. Those are obviously made up in the revisions to that parking lot. We lose, I think, 4 on Erie Street in front of Knox Presbyterian Church, where the existing obelisk is, the gateway there. Okay. There's a proposed little bulb out, that will hit you in the eye, right there. I think we're down 1 over here, but I want to use this as an example of what happens when you go into detailed design. This was the plan here. So when we got into detailed design and consulted the Art Center, they said, hey, can you bring back a loading zone for us here?
I'm bringing that up.
So we looked at it and said, yeah, so it's not actually being built like that. There's going to be another parking space added as a loading zone. That's the kind of thing that happens in detailed design, okay? You have a concept here, and they like the concept because why? It widens out the sidewalk all the way around their property, and the amount of public space is increased exponentially, really. It's pi r squared, right? So you open up the radius by 8 feet in each direction. So they like the concept, but when you apply the detailed design, we were able to do that here. So I'm hoping that gives you a little bit of comfort level in terms of the future here and the idea of a master plan. It's not to say this, thou shalt have a loading zone here, thou shalt have this many parking spaces here. And I also hope that the comfort level in terms of parking, loss of on-street parking, we've seen over half of it already just with Mill Street. Our concept was, and maybe I didn't emphasize this enough, but there's a new parking lot proposed here on Mill Street. There's a new parking lot proposed to add on to the Queens lot here. There's a new parking lot proposed here at Nelson, and there's a new parking lot proposed here at Wellington, and a new parking lot proposed over here at Victoria. In the 15 years or whatever of the master plan, we see those as natural locations. They're made accessible because of the improvements in pedestrian corridors along all of the ones that I've already described. I won't say them again. So that's how you were trying to interconnect the and balance the objectives. We're trying to balance on and off-street parking. You take some away on the on-street, you put it back in the off-street, and we overachieved in that regard. Okay, we're trying to widen sidewalks for pedestrians. You're trying to balance that with the speed limit of the cars, and so on and so forth. All of these things become interconnected, and we've tried to balance it in a way that is more consistent with the modern thinking of walkable communities. It's the best I can do.
Okay, I'm just trying to get a better idea where those spaces were lost, and I'm just trying to get a better idea where those spaces were lost, and that's why I sent the email to Alex on the weekend. I was hoping it got to you, so I'd have those details tonight. Because we do have a lot of concern from the merchants when it comes to the exact details of where we're losing and gaining.
John, you just need your mic on so we can all hear.
There's about 3 in front of what used to be Gilligan, Craves.
Yep.
Okay? So there's 2 or 3 in different locations, but the bulk of them are actually on Mill Street.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned the LAC. That's one that I wanted to bring up again. The last time we were here, we talked about carving back that spot. And I'm looking at this drawing here, which has the date on it of February 2018. And from what I understood when we were here last time, what I'm looking at on this picture here, I'm not seeing that loading zone carved back yet.
If that's got a February date on it, it was, go ahead, Alex.
The spots as discussed at the meeting, the additional spot for the LAC director on the south side of the building has been added, and the 2 additional spots on Talbot Street have been added to the construction plans that LaPera has. So it will be constructed as we discussed multiple times here.
Fantastic. Thank you. Moving on. Page 23 of this report. It talks about the big truck traffic being brought into the uptown by way of the East Arterial Road going forward. What's our game plan to make this happen? Is there signage? Is there going to be barriers put up that doesn't allow?
A continuous process, Councillor Wilkinson. There are several elements that have to work together. I think that the kind of a street environment that you create by doing what we've proposed here, when they come into this area entering the uptown, there are several things we want to have happen to the driver. We want them to know, hey, I'm in uptown Leamington now, and they're going to know that. Why? Because there's a node there, the sidewalks have been narrowed, the streetscaping has been done, the pedestrians are out and sitting enjoying whatever. There's a street cafe happening, there's an ambiance happening, and you know, and the truck driver is saying, I'm just trying to get to Hybrid Canco. I don't really need this. Mm-hmm. So we want him to start thinking, next time I come here, I'm going to take an easier way for me. And that's going to be the East Side Arterial Road, probably to Oak Street. That's what we want. There are other, you know, hammers you can use. Sorry, Counselor. There are bylaw prohibitions that you can apply as a municipal council if you get to that, say, no trucks. Before you get there, you can put up signs that say, trucks, please use here. So your friends at the Ministry of Transportation on Highway 3, Highway 77, your friends at County Road 33, and some of you sit on County Council, so, those are the kinds of things that you can do. I also have included in the report the comment that the BIA can play a role, because they're the ones that still want to have accessibility for their goods movement, delivery, pickup, and so on. They make arrangements with their deliverers to use that route. And we're going to say, look, this is going to be a lot easier for you. We want you to use that route and encourage it to happen in that way. And we'll give them a map and say, you can get to our place by doing this.
Now,
from a design point of view, we've made sure that all of the turning movements along Talbot Street are accessible by the goods movement industry, okay? So the radii for the turning and so on. And you can do things at the detailed design level to help that out. So is that's the direction you were?
Worst case scenario, I think for the first year after we get this, once the cement's poured here and a new road with all these bulb outs are introduced, we're probably going to have 6 to 8 months, if not longer, of people pulling in town with their big rigs, not knowing any better, and they're going to want to go to Highbury, Canco, like you say. Is that going to be allowable if we got a busy Saturday going on downtown? If everybody's
One of my favorite things is that if that's a serious trucker, he's only going to do it once, okay? That's basically it. They will learn to do by doing.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that he or she can get out to the south end if they have to.
There will be no safety issue associated with it because you're going to have a lane of traffic that the truck can drive on. But he may be inconvenienced because he may be delayed, and he's not going to like that.
Sure.
But that's what's going to encourage him not to do it again.
I got you.
It's going to be an evolutionary process like that. But right now, there are very few impediments. What's to stop the truck driver from coming down Erie Street? It's quite wide. He's got no impediments. It gets to the library right now, southbound, and what happens? We cleared the parking out. There's nothing there, so that makes the street wider for him, and he can, move on. So those kinds of design features are really key in making that happen. And eventually the message will get through.
Councillor, Mr. Del Branco has a little bit to add to that.
I just wanted to comment on John's comments about the truck movements. The truck movements through the Uptown plan, as the design shows, are difficult but not impossible. So the trucks will still be able to make their movements, make their turns. If they come in down Erie Street to make the turn to make a delivery to Gabriel's, they'll still be able to make that turn at Talbot and head to Albert to head north to get into their loading bay. They'll still be able to make those turns. They won't like it,
right?
But they will be able to make the turns.
That's exactly what I was looking for. Thank you. Moving on. One thing we don't have in this town, and we've tried it before, is spot for food trucks. We got no good spots uptown. Right now, we put them out east of town. We put one across the road. Where would be good candidates in this plan here, like for food trucks, mobile food vendors? This is something that I was hoping would maybe be spots would be allowed for it.
It's not a land use opportunity to regulate, but it would be a separate bylaw, whether you like to encourage them through your transient trader bylaws. So if you have them permitted, then you can also take that next step in areas that are prohibited versus areas that are permitted. But a food truck is a mobile type of use. It could be put in any space where a vehicle can be parked.
Right.
So whether you allow for special events where you would allow them on a grassed area, or if you allow them on a day-to-day basis, they would follow your separate bylaws under your transient trader bylaw.
It was just mentioned to me here last week, the need for that, and they're absolutely right. They said we don't have any spots uptown to go for food trucks or mobile vendors. That's what got me thinking about this plan here. I thought the John Street area there would be fantastic spot for it over in that area, the area over there. Just
Well,
one suggestion.
Just to add to that thought, because I think that you do have opportunities, and why we focused on the 3 public spaces that we did is because they have opportunities for multiple uses. You know, you can use those spaces to promote tourism and, you know, cross-market with the wineries or have, I don't know, cultural events and so on. So it may open up a whole host of ideas, whether you want to have a kiosk or a food vendor or whatever, a food truck, anything. But you have to identify these locations and then what's the proper use of them. And I believe they have multiple uses. And you can do a lot of thinking and a lot of interesting applications in all of those areas.
Thank you. That's all I got for now. Thank you.
Councillor Hammond.
Your worship, thank you. To John, Tracy, and Ron, I mean, I think it's a stellar report. I mean, it's something that, honestly, I hope I'm around long enough to see a lot of this come to fruition. But, yeah, thank you. I was really pleased with the fact that we had talked about in public gathering spaces. I think that's important. I mean, it's talked about all the time uptown in public spaces and green spaces as well. And I'll eventually get to my question, but I think that Mill Street is going to become a measuring stick when it's completed. And I think we've all got anticipation of seeing it done and what it's going to bring, and it'll give us a better idea moving forward what we can expect. But now to my question. How often, I mean, we have this document that you've been working on for some time. And, I mean, it clearly could be revised almost daily. And what I'm thinking of, John, and I'll address my question to you, we have the burnout building on Erie Street North that's been burnt out for a period of time now. You know, it's on the west side. Is that something you jump on board and say, wait a minute now, we've got this burnout building, maybe the municipality should be looking at buying that, give better access to those alleys that are going back in there, which are now, you can't get a truck in and out of there for unloading and loading. And by doing that, would it get some of the traffic off of Mill Street, or not Mill, but Erie and Talbot, if we could have better access back in there?
Well, it's probably a complicated response. We did not look specifically at any particular alleyway. We looked at areas. And let me give you a contrast. The area on Mill Street, beside the International Hotel, okay, we do see potential for that area. And it's partly alley and partly private property. The reason is because it's contiguous to one of our pedestrian corridors, okay? If you contrast that with the spot that you're talking about, the alley system, which I know very well, in here, it doesn't go anywhere. There are no public spaces back in there, and so the other part of the answer, Councillor Hammond, is something like this. We're working within the public right-of-way here, and so whatever we do to encourage a nice environment, just leave it at that, we have to let the people on the other side of the property line now pick up the hammer. And go with it. Okay, that's our dividing line. We can provide beautiful infrastructure, wonderful places, nice environment, you know, physical environments, but picking that torch up and moving forward on the private sector with some economic development or business investment or what have you.
Well,
Does that help?
Well, to some degree, John, yes. And I I think that I'm looking at this more of a living document, something that would change. It could change day by day. God forbid we don't have any more fires, but that could change the complexion of what we look at purchasing and what we do. Another example of that is that the building the town purchased not too long ago on Mill Street to give us access through to that parking lot on Russell Street over too. So, and that's why I refer to this as a living document. This kind of changes the perspective about the walk around that you'd already pointed out about going up Fox Street and coming around that way. Now we have a right of way through there. So,
Yes, exactly.
so I would anticipate that you would come back to council on various times. I mean, we're proposing buying up some property and creating parking lots and doing some things. So I'm anticipating you would come back to council and say, oh, wait a minute, as a result of that fire, again, I'll go back to that, on that building on Erie Street North, we think that maybe you should take a look at, and this could revise our plan slightly, because this could be a parkade, or it could be parking, or something to that nature.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, one final thought in that same direction. Everything that I had said would probably change dramatically if a private sector developer came in and acquired some of these properties and came in and said, listen, you guys, I have an idea. Okay, but the idea is going to require a little enhancement to this access alley or some kind of parquet in the rear or what have you. And so then we say, okay, we can see how that integrates in with our Uptown Master Plan. So there's many ways that this is a living document. I totally agree with that. But for the moment, okay, for what we see here and what we see developing, this is what we think is the best balance and leads us in the right direction. But absolutely should be wide open to any kinds of encouraging economic development or whatever, and integrate those back with what we're doing here.
Yep. Great. Thanks, John, for your time.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a visionary plan, and that's why there is some hesitancy, because we all bear scars of other plans that haven't always gone down well with the public, and we are the ones that are the buffer between the plan and admin. So that's the reason for the questions and a bit of the hesitancy. And I know you understand that, John, because you witnessed some of the scars on put upon us in the term or the times you were here. I just want to say a couple things that I really like about this. I love the public spaces. Whether or not we ever see that winter garden concept come to full fruition, that's debatable, or hopefully we see it through. But the fact that we're going to do something with these public spaces besides just grass is fantastic. And that is that piazza idea that we do need to provide to the residents in our community. I love what you've planned for the library in the Centennial Park. Again, that's something that we will bear some scars, because people are so used to the grid pattern of getting from point A to point B, and it's always about time, right? How quickly can I get there? And this will cause a bit of kerfuffle, if you will, but it's beautiful. It's beautiful, and it's inviting. And even if we're one of the first, I'm fine with being one of the first to have some interesting modes of transportation through our community. I still struggle with the bike and that bike stuff, and I need to have that conversation deeper with my colleagues, whether it's Sharrow's or whatever. And Queen Street, you still have to convince me. I don't back into a parking spot. That's a genetic thing, I believe. I cannot do that. I have no interest in doing it. I never will. So that's another concept that we might have to talk through. But on the whole, I love this. I think that Mill Street will be, as I believe John said, kind of our model. It'll be like Old Walkerville, that section of about 4 blocks by Vito's Pizzeria that is so inviting and makes you want to sit and stay there. I think that's what we'll see. Once this is finished, that Mill Street part, it will be easier to sell some of the other parts of this plan. And that's how I feel we need to go forward. The fact that we are doing some a little bit outside the box things are exciting to me, but we'll have to sell it. So anyway, I just wanted to say to you that overall, I love this. I just have a few quibbles with minor things. And with the Monarch, I need to say to you, I like the Monarch, but it, to me, smacks of Point Peely. And that's where I have the problem with it. I love Point Peely, but that's an entity unto itself. I would like us to again have deeper conversation about what our core is and what we and the residents, the business owners and council, what we feel the core should be symbolized by. I just don't believe it's the monarch butterfly. But that's, further down the road. Anyway, I wanted to say to you how much I love this. And it is much more enhanced. I sat through Monteith and Dillon and so on and so on and so on. So this to me has more, it has more jazz to it. There's more concrete things that we will be changing, and that for me is exciting. But it will be a selling thing that we will have to do to our residents. So I just wanted to say that to you and wanted to explain to you why there is some hesitancy. I have questions too, but you know what? There's no point in asking them at this point in time because they're just little small, insignificant things. But for the most part, I love this.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I'd just like to respond to one thing and use it as an example of what happens as you go through the process, and that is the idea of the backing in on Queens Avenue. We've shown that because it was presented as an idea, and we've heard talk of it around, and we wanted it to be a little bit out there. But from a practical matter and a process matter, you don't lose a single spot if you reverse and have drive-in parking. That's an argument that is appropriately done at the detailed design stage when you get ready to redo that side of Queens Avenue. And, we've had different discussions with administration about ideas in other locations. And, you may want to have a trial somehow. I don't know. But I'm just saying that's a great example of what process is involved and considerations are involved when you go from this master plan into the detailed design with additional community consultations and resolve it at that level. It doesn't make any difference in the concepts of the Uptown Master Plan.
Further questions from council? No? Before we go to our next delegation. So, John, the conversation I'm hearing coming from council right now is a lot more positive than I was hearing when we first started your presentation. And I'm very, very pleased at that. Much like the deputy mayor says, there's reason for hesitation. And I think in a lot of cases where there are members of council, and I don't mean just Leamington Council, but I mean all councils, it's hard for people to see past their term of service, so 4 years. And I remember our first strategic retreat, and I'll bring up the late Councillor Rick Atkin, and how we almost gave him a heart attack at our strategic retreat when we said we'd like to just close the whole uptown off and make it all pedestrian, no traffic at all. And when we did that, all we were doing was thinking, big picture. What could we do to make the most effective difference in the uptown core? And I think everybody on this council has said the same thing. We want this changed. We want things better. So for us to take a view 20 years out, I don't care what you say, it's really hard to do. This, to me, when I read it, there wasn't anything in here that I did not like, however you say it, without a double negative. I thought it was all really fantastic. Does it all fit comfortably? Yeah, maybe not. Maybe it does. You're not moving the tomato over to wherever you said you're going to. It's going to stay where it is, just so you know. But those kind of things were just your visioning of what we were all trying to accomplish, and that's how I see this report. And when I see in the recommendation that we approve this in principle, living document, we change it every day, every other day, whatever happens, that was the main point that I needed to hear and read. So I'm loving this document totally, and I'm really hoping council will support it, because it is. It's really just a roadmap to where we can take the Uptown core. And whatever council is here, or whatever happens, another fire, maybe town council says, well, we just want to buy those buildings anyway. We're coming back to your firm and saying, hey, this is what we're doing. How does this alter? And that's going to be the coolest, most exciting part of this whole thing. So those are my 2 cents worth. And I personally, your whole team, I say thank you. I think you've done a great job. So, okay. Councillor?
Thank you, Worship. I just want to clarify my position with my opening remarks prior to this. I'm not against this plan. I thought it was excellent as well. And there's some things like the rest of the councillors had in mind here that were acceptable, and some were not acceptable to individuals that we are. And as I said before, I think it's great. We need to move forward. We need to have that long vision. I think our last retreat was the first time that we did a 20-year plan. Everything before that was the term of a council, 4 years. And it was great. But I just want to make clear that I'm not opposed to this. I'm not saying let's delay it or not get to it. My whole concept was this, is I didn't want to commit other individuals to something that they had no input into. And as I say, it's a great plan, and I'm not opposed. Thank you.
Mr. Neufeld?
Right at the beginning, when council was having the discussion around impacting future councils, administration have collectively been working on a counter recommendation for council to consider, given what your concerns were. And so I'm wondering, we'd like to be able to offer something a little bit different just before you consider the recommendations. We'll have something else for you to consider, which softens those areas that you were concerned of and addresses some of those issues.
Okay. So we have a delegation from the BIA here, and I invite her up to address council.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you this evening on behalf of over 200 businesses represented in the Uptown core. I would presume that you will anticipate that the BIA Board of Directors excitedly supports this Uptown Master Plan, and we thank John Toffelmeyer and his team at RC Spencer for including the Uptown merchants in the design process so as to incorporate ideas and solutions that best suit the needs of our members. You may recall that the BIA made a presentation at the strategic meeting held by Council in July of 2017 as well. At that meeting, we supported the need for beautification of the Uptown through streetscaping initiatives and more, but we also highlighted the need for foundational issues to be addressed to prevent the types of activity that is happening currently from having a detrimental outcome through this investment with respect to beautification. The little things such as poor quality signage, abandoned vehicles, garbage protruding out of dumpsters, commercial properties being utilized for residential and industrial purposes does have a negative impact on the image of our district. For that reason, we request that a thorough review of the current bylaws be undertaken with goals set for new and revised bylaws to be implemented in a timely fashion so as to protect the investments that you're talking about making on behalf of the taxpayers. In addition to the revision of bylaws, manpower such as that provided to the parks and the marina for the enjoyment of the entire community should be provided to this region as well, so as to ensure that the district remains clean, inviting, and safe, as this is what consumers have repeatedly expressed will bring them back to the core. We feel that when the Uptown is clean, inviting, and safe, it will not only bring consumers back, but it will also encourage quality entrepreneurs to consider Leamington, and also property owners will be enticed to improve the buildings located within it. We appreciate this council taking the initial steps to begin the process of revitalizing the Uptown core. We know that this is not something that is done by one member of council or administration on their own, but requires a combined and collaborated effort, and for that, we are thankful to all of you, and we look forward to working alongside you to bring back the core of our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions? Okay. So, Brianna has, okay, where am I going? That way. Okay, this way, behind you. So the Leamington Uptown Master Plan, August 2018, be prepared by R.C. Spencer Associates Incorporated, be approved in principle as a basis for future infrastructure improvements and beautification in Uptown Leamington, and that the relevant sections be considered during ongoing and future reviews and updates of the official plan, zoning bylaw, and community improvement plan. In English. Mr. Sharon?
Your Worship, I simply suggest that, in very short term, it means accepted as the basis for future planning. It doesn't put anything in concrete. Certainly any project, infrastructure improvement project, or changes to any bylaw or zoning would all be brought in front of council, recognizing, the comments that have been brought up today. Certainly any detailed design of road improvements, including crosswalks and those sorts of things, would all be brought forward to council. Active transportation considerations would all be brought to council and explained to council, the council of the day, and they can determine at that time if that's something that they wish to do. Like we talked about, long-term planning document, guidance document allows us to appreciate that if council does support this, then we need to circle around and say, where the priorities, all for, again, future discussion with council. When council sees the 2019 budget, we'll have some discussions about, what's practical, what could we possibly achieve in 2019, how we've brought these considerations into the budget, and recognizing that our 5-year capital plan is full up. Every time, we do these capital plans, it's a matter of not trying to determine what to do, but what not to do. There's so much competing priorities in the municipality, and bringing in particular projects will mean removing other projects out of the capital plan in order to accomplish it. So again, accepting in principle means that we can then take this as the guidance document and try to incorporate it into our plans for council and future councils.
Okay, thank you very much. So instead of the 6 individuals, we're just doing the one that's on the board. Questions or comments from council? Well, or we can discuss it, whichever you want to do. If you want to put it on the floor, that's fine. Doesn't matter. Deputy Mayor?
I just wanted to say that it's specific enough to say that we know what we're talking about, but general enough to not hem us in. So I'm very comfortable with this. And further, I agree with what Lisa Bratt said, that there are other things that we need to do in the meantime to bring our core back up to what it used to be. And I'm very happy that the R.C. Spencer folks also addressed the crime issue, and that lighting and so on was also part of what they looked at. So to me, I feel like we're encompassing the whole picture. So I'm very fine with this, and I would make the motion.
Very good.
We accept
Moved.
this.
Support by Councillor Wilkinson. With comment? Sure.
And I'm going to piggyback too on what Lisa said there. I think it'd be irresponsible of this council here if we agree to a $7.5 million project that we spend on, if we don't take a thorough look at the upkeep and maintenance of our uptown. That includes bylaws, property standards, crime, the OPP have to be involved. I think that's going to be a discussion that comes up here soon. I look at it like building a beautiful couple $1 million home, and then we just let it go to crap afterwards, by not putting policies in place, good procedures that are going to keep our shiny new toy nice, clean. We really got to have the right attitude when it comes to the uptown. we're going to be getting back here soon, data. We got a pilot project out there on proactive bylaw enforcement right now. We haven't even seen the data back on that yet. So I think there's so much discussion to come down the road here on how we can, make improvements. I think the first place we got to start with is going to be the sign bylaw. Sign bylaw has to get overhauled. We just can't keep on going forward the way we have been. I'd like to see us talk about, you talked about the budget, Rob, us make sure we talk about committing the staff again to the uptown, both staff and equipment. Deputy Mayor's been asking for a sidewalk machine cleaner since I started 4 years ago, and we still don't have that thing. I know you brought me up to speed on where we're at today, but those are the little things that we talk about that are going to make such a big difference on me being comfortable to say, I agree to this $7.5 million project. It's going to be more than that even. But if we aren't doing the little things, committing staff, getting the equipment that we need, reviewing our bylaws, property standards, talking with the OPP, about maybe putting more police uptown, almost like a focus spot, then I think it's irresponsible of our council to go spend that type of money. So anyway, if we're here again, whoever is, that'll be coming back up first and foremost. Thank you.
So we have a motion on the floor, seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? And carried. Awesome. Matters for approval, there are none. Other matters for consideration, there are none. And report on closed session, there is one.
A closed meeting was held at 5:30 p.m. prior to the open session of council pursuant to subsection 239(2)D of the Municipal Act for the purpose of considering one item, verbal report regarding labor relations direction. Council provided direction to administration with regard to the matter. Proper notice of the meeting was given and the meeting adjourned at 5:50 p.m.
Consideration of bylaws.
Bylaw 60-18 being a bylaw to impose fees and charges by the corporation and the municipality of Leamington. Bylaw 64-18 being a bylaw to provide that part lot control shall not apply to certain lands within registered plan 12M 646. Bylaw 65-18 being a bylaw to confirm proceedings of the council of the municipality of Leamington at its meeting held October 9th, 2018.
Council's wishes. Moved by Councillor Rubicki, support by Councillor Dunn. Discussion on the motion. All in favor? And carried. Notice of motion, there were none circulated, so open session for council and admin. Councillor Verbicki.
Well, this is our last meeting till the election, so make sure people vote.
I just want to say congratulations to all of us for passing a rather significant piece of legislation tonight. I think that showed true leadership on all of our parts and good on all of us. So let's see if we can't make it move forward in the years to come. Statement members non-debatable. None. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Jacobs and Councillor Verbicki, all in favor, and carried.